Check, check. Oh, there it is. Okay. Welcome to Sit and See. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I'm on a bit of a mission, as I like to say at the beginning of my streams, to help people understand meditation in a modern layperson context. Quite happy to say that in the first 60 days or so, here we are on day 58, that a few people who have started training with me just in that period of time have already made some progress, according to them, that is meaningful and significant. So that makes me quite happy. Here we are fulfilling the mission. Also, some of you might have noticed the merch. The merch has arrived. Check it out. So for the Lohan thing, I ended up designing some T-shirts and hoodies and fun stuff for people that wanted them, and I ordered one. I ordered one to see how they look, and they look pretty good. I'm quite happy. Excellent. All right, friends. Well, here we are on another sit and see. What is there to go over? So, as you know, first 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so, I try to answer questions. I try to wrap that up around 9 London time and then get into some practice. So, if you do have questions about your meditation practice, just let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'll ramble on until we get to practice time. Right. What to report? What to report? We talked a bit yesterday about rumination meditation, which I put at the end of the 5 foundations, which are the techniques that I teach. And the the reason that I put it at the end, the reason I put it at number 5 is that to do rumination meditation properly, you already need to have some skill controlling your mind. It's quite difficult to reshape what's on the surface of your mind if you don't already have some ability to place your mind where you want and keep it there. It's also quite difficult to do this if you have very little ability to separate your awareness from the contents of your consciousness. So if it seems like your awareness and the contents of your awareness are basically that you can't pull them apart, it makes rumination meditation much more difficult because it seems like your emotions are you. It seems like the things that I hold so dear in this world, that's me. But no, that's just stuff on the surface of your mind. So when you train in meditation, you're learning how to, for lack of a better term, you're learning how to. Um, Sorry, my friends, just adjusting something. Okay. Hopefully the sound is okay. Somebody was saying it sounded a little bit too metallic, and I'm trying to fix this problem. Right. Okay. So let me also change the overlay. Okay. Now we're fully rocking and rolling. All right. So um the reason that I place this at the basically the end is also not just because you need to have some internal skills already to do rumination and work with what's on the surface of your mind, but also because these are actually subjects quite often that require a lot of study and a lot of thought and a lot of sort of work to get established. And This is just quite difficult to do in the beginning. It's quite difficult if you don't know anything. Hmm. It seems like my stream is getting a bad connection. Try closing a few things. Sorry, my friends. Okay, looks like it's back up to normal now. Okay. So, for example, with regards to metta, we were talking about metta practice yesterday. When you're trying to cultivate metta, this requires that you understand what a sentient being is, that you understand what the three kinds of suffering are, that you understand and have some belief, actually, also, if you want to have full blown metta, in karma and rebirth and realms of rebirth. And there's a lot that goes into having full on metta, according to Buddhist psychology. And a fair amount of that is worldview, for example. Goodwill doesn't require that, as we were talking about yesterday, but this thing called loving kindness. Hey Ty, welcome. Thank you. This thing called loving kindness actually does require all of these other moving parts, all of these other components to be in place. Yeah. So if you were going to sit down and do all of my techniques in an hour, and you were already quite competent, let's say, then you might start with 2 or 3 minutes of intensive breath just to get the mind pulled in. Then you might do 5, 10, 15 minutes of body scanning to get the concentration to be quite deep as quickly as you can. So now you have a mind that's pulled in, calm. Then you might open, if depending on how you're doing in your opening of the sense gates, you could just open all five external gates at the same time if you were capable of that. But probably that's not where most of you are at. So maybe you just open the the tactile gate, and then the visual gate, and maybe the sound gate, and that takes you, let's say, 10 minutes while you're holding those three open. And now you're at 35 minutes. Then you spend a good 15 solid minutes just abiding in a non-doing state, observing consciousness with consciousness, observing the contents of consciousness with consciousness. And you could actually just from there stay in that for the remainder of the session. 20 minutes, what's left? 35, 25 minutes, right? If we did 35, should be about 25 minutes left. So then you could do that. Or you could split your time and do 15 minutes of focusing on consciousness and then another 10 minutes ruminating on whatever the thing is you're working on. So if you have a problem with anger, as some of us do, I was talking to some of the students in the last few days that have this issue. Whatever your thing is, if you don't have strong willpower, if you have really powerful lust, if like whatever's getting you in trouble in the real world and harming other people in the real world and harming you in the real world, that's what you should be studying and ruminating on to try to overcome it. Because the quicker you do that, the better your life will be. As we were talking about yesterday with patience, if you're not a big prick, then people will want to help you and they'll think well of you and they'll try to stop bad things from happening to you instead of the other way. So there's a ton of benefits right here and now. um, Patience is also like a really good friend. Like a good friend, patience want will if we were to personify patience, patience is like a best friend who has been working at a company for a long time and gives you a recommendation. Patience is like a good friend who introduces you to someone, and before they even met you, they have a good impression of you, right? A new friend or a new romantic interest or something. Anger is the opposite. Anger is like somebody that goes around and says, you know that prick, Jared Jones? He's a real scumbag. Be careful when he comes around. Right? Because your anger sets up a reputation for you. And it basically, not in real life, but kind of in a way, it kind of goes around and lets people know that you're unstable, you're untrustworthy, that you fly off the handle and you do stuff that you shouldn't do. And patience does the opposite. People go, this guy's really calm, and under pressure, he gets stuff done, and he's real solid, honest. So, anyways, in terms of that last 10 minutes, you could do rumination on whatever your big problem is. So there are, for those of you who don't know, there are antidotes to specific problems that you have in terms of anger or lust or whatever is getting you in trouble, is the main thing. And you can think through and use observation and use logic based in the real world to convince yourself, first of all, that it's not a good idea to chase those feelings when they come up. That's the first thing. So you contemplate the negative aspects of whatever this mental state is, like we were just doing with anger. Um, in terms of keeping track of time, I've never been besides with certain practices, I've never been the type of guy to set a timer. I've just sort of do the amount of practice that's required for each part. And if I don't get to it, then I don't then I because it's not working, then I just don't get to the next part. You know what I mean? Now, probably what would also work quite well would be 2 or 3 minutes of intensive breath, pull the mind in, 10 minutes or so of body scanning, make the mind very calm, transition over to opening the external sense gates to tame the external gates, turn the mind towards consciousness, and then spend 30 minutes or so abiding in consciousness as best you can. If the mind starts to get dull, sleepy, the mind's not cooperating, abiding in consciousness, which will probably happen, then switch back to the sense gates or change over to rumination or stand up and do standing body scanning, right? So, this is actually a toolkit of stuff to work with yourself to make sure that whatever faults are coming up in the practice that you can manage those. And it's a bit more organic actually than sort of militaristic. You're learning to work with yourself skillfully based on what's actually going on. And then another session might be that you sit down with the idea that you're going to spend 20 or 30 minutes, the main part of the session, let's say, you're going to spend the main part of the session doing rumination. And you can alternate. One day when the mind is really, really calm for some reason, that's a great day to do meditation on consciousness. Another day when your mind is like stirred up and it won't get inside as much as you want, etc., that's actually an okay day to do rumination because yeah, like until each part does what it's supposed to do, do the previous part. And then in addition to that, hopefully you can get some sense from what I'm saying that you start to get to know yourself where you go, yeah, I've been at this for 10 minutes and my mind is not getting into consciousness. It's not getting into the contents of consciousness the way that it does in it during a good session. I'm going to pull back out and now I'm going to do rumination for the remaining 20 minutes. So you can learn, you can again, if you were going to sort of devote an hour each day formally in a way to doing these practices in that way, you could do it that way. Yeah. And then what will happen over time is that there will be other things that your tradition wants you to do or other things you need to train in, you know. Like at the moment I'm doing some practices from one of my teachers and it takes between an hour and 2 hours a day, and basically I don't have much energy to do anything besides those practices because of what they are, you know. So that's it. That's what I do. I do those. And then when I come hang out with you guys, I do a little bit of my foundation practices. And then when I do the Lohan stuff, sometimes I put some of the opening the sense gates into those practices sometimes. So okay, blue. I'd love to hear more about the Buddhist view on ruminating. It's often a negative feedback loop. Right. Okay. So the reason I chose that term to translate this particular type of meditation is for that very reason. When you read, I don't know if I could find it on live or not. If I can find it, I'll read it straight out of the text. So in Yangtze Rinpoche's Lamrim, for example, practicing the path, when he talks about this issue, if I can track it down, at some point I was using this book for this very reason. And so I was hoping that because I had that page open, that if I just sort of flipped through, the book would remember, because I had it folded open there. Uh, but since it doesn't seem like the book is going to cooperate with me in that way, I'll just have to do my best. Um, oh, does he have a glossary? If he has a glossary, I can find it under inappropriate attention. Come on. Ah, okay. Now, if he has this labeled properly, then it would be under appropriate attention, but he may not. Anger. No. Okay. So inappropriate attention then. Ignorance. Inappropriate attention, 220. There it is. And the book does not at all remember. Yes. Yes. I don't know if this is the place. Okay. Well, I'll have to do my best then. In any case, somewhere in this book, and I have it pulled out somewhere else for a piece of work that I was doing at one point on this. Um, and in Pabonka Rinpoche's Lamrims, usually, I think in his other Lamrim, Pabonka Rinpoche has a description of this type of meditation. And so basically what this term entails is that normally, as you said, when you have a negative emotion, the way that it becomes more powerful is that you sit around connecting experiences, observations, reason, right? And you're connecting things into a package. So, for example, how many times have you, like somebody at work, let's say, right? On day one, they looked at you across the room and they just made a face. And for some reason, you didn't like them, right? You don't really know why, but you didn't like them. And then as time went on, you found reasons to not like them, right? Like, oh, the way that they put artificial sweetener in their coffee. They put they put I don't know. They eat non-organic food. They speak rudely to this person and they do this as a hobby and right? And so you connect thing after thing after thing after thing to initially what was this little tiny feeling of I don't like that. Not sure if I like this, right? A little tiny feeling of discomfort. You connected that to more and more and more and more reasons until it was full blown. I wish this person wasn't here. I wish I didn't have to work with this weird person. I don't like this person at all. And then they say something to you one day, and then it goes from discomfort to like full on anger, where you're like, I really hate this person. What the hell is this person's problem? How could they have done such and such? How could they have voted for the liberals? How could they have voted for the conservatives? Are they an idiot? Whatever, right? So we take whatever's there and we ruminate on it. We think about it over and over and over again and connect a lot of experiences and a lot of things to it until it becomes a powerful emotion. So in the great texts, including this Lamrim written by a modern saint, a reincarnate Lama, he says the exact same process you use to basically screw yourself up, you can use that process in exactly the same way to generate virtuous minds, virtuous mental states. So I very deliberately chose this term rumination because it is the negative process by which you create negative mental states. And in the text, it says that process is the one that you hijack and use in exactly the same way it happens naturally by accident to, on purpose, create virtuous mental states that you want. Does that make sense? So, again, this is part of skillfully working with yourself. So rumination meditation is, I think, more difficult than other kinds of meditation, also because the results are, generally speaking, formless meditations. If you were going to do them full on, having the emotional state of humility as a state of concentration, you have generated the mind. To use my normal analogy, here's your five external senses. You didn't generate your five external senses into humility. You generated the central mind. You generated mental factors of humility attached to the central mind. So if you pull the attention in and focus on the humility, then you're focused on the central mind, which is a formless object. So this is not actually an easy object to hold your mind on with a great deal of single pointed focus. So again, there's a reason I put it sort of more towards the end. If you're going to be working with your mind, it'd be good to know what it is, and it'd be good to know what mental content is, and good to know that what you are extends beyond mental content, because that's not how it seems as a normal person. It seems like you are your mental content as a normal person, and I don't want to try to convince anyone that they're not. Like, I would just rather have you do the practices and figure out that that's how it is. Otherwise, people will debate you. They're like, no, no, I am my feelings. My feelings are what make me that's what makes me what I am. I'm not living my most authentic life if I'm not following my feelings. Okay. Do I think a strict hour of body scanning is too artificial? I don't know. If you were doing that as part of see, here's the thing. You have to understand about training in a lineage. Quite often, they're doing things with you that aren't just the thing that they're doing. The thing that's obvious is I'm telling you to meditate for an hour. The thing that's not obvious is if you try to meditate for an hour and fail for the next 3 years because I haven't given you enough information, you'll develop character. And once you have heart and character, and I give you the remainder of the information you need to make progress, you're going to make really rapid progress. But since you didn't have character to start with, since you didn't have heart to start with, I have to do something to help you develop it. Since you're interested in meditation, I'm going to help you fail at meditation so that you can develop the type of mind that's capable of dealing with failure. I'm not saying that's what they're doing with meditation in this case, because I know what lineage you're in. I don't think that is what they're doing, but you find this sort of thing all the time, where part of what you're doing is shaping your character, not just doing the practice that you're doing for the reason that's being described. So, should you do an hour? Yeah, if that's what your lineage says you should do with that practice in that lineage, then do an hour, because you need to develop good character. Okay, when I do half day meditation, sometimes I find myself crying due to how much of my being and awareness is, yeah. Yeah, retreat can be very intense. I don't know that I need to comment on that too much, but yeah, if you do a lot of retreat, you will probably at some point have strong emotions come up. There's actually a name for that, not in the Buddhist tradition. I think it's in the Yoga Sutras in the Hindu tradition, and they talk about this. There's something about when you're training a lot in meditation, sometimes as you this concentration gets a little bit better, there'll be a big swirl of negative emotions or other emotions that comes up, and that kind of rips you right out of the meditation. Hey Dylan, I've been thinking about you. Where have you been? I've been thinking about you a lot. I hope you're doing well. All right. The retreat went okay. A couple of people had good experiences. I think Jay was there. I think Jay had a good experience. We basically focused on standing and walking, which is a bit unusual to do a whole retreat focused on that aspect. And I felt it went well. Okay. We're getting a little bit over time, so I'm going to blaze through the questions that are here in the chat, and then we'll do our practice. How do we use impermanent suffering and not self to live better? Honestly, I think people flagellate themselves, they beat themselves with these ideas, and they think that's what you're supposed to do with them. And I don't think that's how it's supposed to work at all. I think you need to spend so much time thinking about impermanence, studying it, being fully convinced by the arguments, and then meditating on the correct understanding once you have fully agreed with the argument about impermanence, for example. And then that changes how you interact with other things because they are impermanent. And if you interact with them in a way that they don't exist, that can't possibly turn out well for you, right? If you're interacting with the world in a fantasized delusional way, clearly there's a problem with that. I don't know that I need to get into detail, but it should be obvious that living through a fantasy that isn't how things are has to cause problems, right? Somehow. And same thing in terms of suffering. You just have to think about the three types of suffering until not that you have a especially for, and I don't want to put you on blast, Jay, but for a type of person who wants to be a faithful Buddhist, let's say, it's very easy to go, oh yes, I agree with this because it's in the tradition, and that's not what that information is for. You need to spend serious time thinking it through and sort of like with, I mean, not sort of, actually do rumination on it until you go, yes, this is actually how it is based upon the very best I can do looking at how the world is. This is an accurate description of the world. And then once that understanding occurs, you hold it with concentration. And then that naturally becomes how you interact with things, because pleasure is a category of suffering, and obvious suffering is a category of suffering, and nobody needs to convince you of that. You don't have to beat yourself over the head with it. It's just obvious if you've thought it through, that pleasure can't be the way that it seems. It's not obvious if you don't think it through. And so my approach is, you do the really sort of crunchy study on these subjects until you're really convinced that's how it is, and then you meditate on the resulting change in attitude, and then that resulting change in attitude begins to naturally come up in your behavior. And once again, how could it possibly benefit you, since you think pleasure is happiness? Intellectually, you might say, "Oh no, I'm a good Buddhist and I don't believe that." But in reality, you still believe that. It's not just an idea that you've gotten wrong. It's a perceptual problem. So basically, you need to spend a lot of time meditating on the opposite of this problem, so that this attitude, even though the perception doesn't change, right? You still look at pleasure and you go, "Oh yeah, that could make me happy," but you don't believe that perception, and therefore you don't chase that misperception into really stupid stuff like eating ice cream until you throw up, or cheating on your wife, or this sort of thing. Yeah. And then finally, non-self, not self, emptiness, selflessness, same thing. That is how the world is. And simply saying, "Well, I'm a good Buddhist, so I accept this. I believe this now," doesn't actually do anything. I mean, I'm being slightly too harsh, but not much. Like that, if that's all you did, as soon as you died, that goes away, according to Buddhist psychology. So you need to do more than that. You need to become fully convinced that's actually how it is because you've thought it through, and then meditate on the result, which is both the correct understanding in one case and the change in attitude in the other, until that becomes natural to how you interact with the world. Because the problem is perceptual. You see things existing inherently, you see things existing with the wrong type of self inside, and you need to become so convinced that that couldn't possibly be true because you've thought about it from 100,000 different angles and meditated on the results of correctly understanding emptiness and selflessness. And therefore, even though I look and I see an inherent camera sitting here, I don't believe that it's an inherent camera. I don't accept that. So then, therefore, the way that I interact with it, despite how it appears, let me say it again, in spite of how it appears, I don't chase that appearance. That's training. Yeah. Because we've gone through this a million times now, but for those of you who are new, if you look at a mountain that's 400,000 years old, you look at it and you go, has nothing to do with me. I just happened to be here hiking through the Appalachia and this mountain was here. And, I saw it. I stood on it. I heard it. I smelled it. Maybe if I fell on my face or got some dirt in my food, I tasted it. But this 400,000-year-old mountain is or 400 million-year-old mountain has not very much to do with me, right? Like I just turned up here and it was already here. But then if you ask a stupid fourth grader question like, where does the mountain begin? If it's a real thing out there, it has to start somewhere, doesn't it? Where does it start? Where does it end? Does it end in the foothills? Does it end on the flat ground? What about what parts are included? Surely, if mountains are made up of parts, we should agree on this. What parts are included? Do we include all the rocks that are loose on the mountain? Or exactly how disconnected from the mountain does a rock need to be until it's not the mountain anymore? And what about inside the mountain? There's loose material inside the mountain too, holding up the whole mountain. Sometimes big chunks of it fall off if it's not supported the right way. So are those loose pieces that are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds that are inside the mountain loose but not connected to the earth in the same way as the pieces that are connected more fully? Are those the mountain, or are those just loose pieces like the rocks on the top? What parts are included in the mountain? Tell me. And if you're starting to feel yourself get slightly uncomfortable and this feeling like, no, there's a mountain there, I just haven't figured it out yet. Give me some time. I'll sort out where that mountain is. That's ignorance. That's the enemy. And the difference between you and a person who has what's called a valid inference of emptiness is that they don't have that little itch inside going, no, no, no. There really is a mountain in there. And if I sort it out, I can find it. Not only is there a mountain out there, there's a beautiful Appalachian mountain out there that everyone has to go see because it's so beautiful and transformative and ooh, it's gonna make everything better about your life if you can just get out there in nature. Get out. That's attachment. That's exaggeration of pleasure, sensory pleasure, because you experience the mountain through your five external senses. Not that nature is bad. Not that nature can't actually make you feel good and slightly calmer and all this. It can. But if you exaggerate that effect and turn it into a pathway to happiness, it never leads to full happiness. It's just It's like having a really nice bite of ice cream. I mean, not quite, but in terms of getting a dose of something, it's a dose effect. And you don't have to spend that much time in nature before you start getting lonely and before the bugs start eating you and other things that you don't like start to happen, you know? Again, not that you have to mind all of that, I suppose. Okay. What if you're convincing yourself it is still thought in operation? I'm not quite sure what this question means. Yeah, Sask. I'm not quite sure what most of this means, but good on you. Um, all right. Well, this is called sit and see, but we don't just sit. We also do standing practice and walking practice, which is what we're going to do tonight. So hopefully you'll forgive me for getting us going a little bit later than I intended, because that was pretty good stuff to cover. Okay. It looks like my video is losing a little bit of internet. So let me just losing a little bit of connection here. Okay. So we'll do a bit of practice together. We'll do some standing and some walking. Okay. So for those of you who have done standing with me before, you know how to stand. I'm not going to go over those instructions tonight. I've done it many times in previous streams. So just start by standing. If you're new, just stand up relatively straight and keep the spine roughly in the same posture you'd have if you were seated in meditation. Okay? So first place the mind on the breath. And following the intensive breath meditation approach, place your mind on the breath with extremely great force. Life and death struggle, extremely great force, extremely great seriousness, because you're trying to pull the bandwidth of your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, and most of the rest of your body, but don't fall over, onto that patch of skin where you feel the breathing inside the nostril or near the tip of the nostril. And if you haven't done that, then you need to generate more force so that that happens, right? Your distractions have extremely great force. They're not going to go away by just being nice to yourself. You have to have extremely great force to meet the force of your extremely great distractions. Okay? So place the mind on the breath with great force and then count in between the out breath and in breath. Count from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 0. Okay? Here we go. 3, 2, 1, begin. Okay. Now, place your attention on the 5 points. For those of you who are new, the 5 points are the top of your head, your hands, and your feet. So, this is an excellent support for walking meditation and can help you transition from simple kind of body awareness, body scanning practices into a type of practice that you can start using while moving, doing complex activities like martial arts, yoga, dance, other things that you might be doing to keep yourself physically active and so forth. So, putting the mind in the 5 points, when you do walking meditation, it's really important that you only walk at the speed you can actually maintain the force of your concentration. So, first, just take a minute, just a minute, to really establish the force of your concentration on the hands, on the feet, and on the about the back third or so of the middle of your skull. So, about here, not here, but back here. Okay, now we're going to begin walking. If you need to walk at this speed to maintain the 5 points, then just walk at this speed. Hopefully, you are alone in the privacy of your own home or somewhere else private, so it won't make any difference to anyone else. The key point is quality over quantity, quality over flashiness. So, after quite a while of doing this practice, you can walk basically at a normal pace. But I'm going to do this because I've been at this for a couple weeks, walking at the pace I can do. It's really important that you walk very, very slowly if that's the best you can do. And when you find that you've lost one of your hands, one of your feet, stop, reestablish all 5 points, and then carry on walking slower than you were, right? Because if you lost the concentration, that's too fast. Okay? All right, begin. Okay. Right. Questions? Regarding dependence, origination, and emptiness, when I'm talking about emptiness in public, quite often I only talk about it in terms of dependent origination. Because when you attack the ontology of the mountain, what people hear is there's no mountain. But that's not what I haven't said that at all. What I've said is the mountain you think is there when you look at it and you think there's this mountain that exists out there utterly independently with all these properties and parts and causes and conditions and boundaries where it begins and ends. That mountain is not there. But at no time whatsoever did I say there's no mountain at all. There's a mountain that dependently arises and dependently exists, but the mountain that you think is there is isn't there at all. It's a completely non-existent thing. So it is actually important to say that. It's important to say that the one that appears to you, that one's non-existent. Utterly non-existent, completely non-existent, entirely non-existent, absolutely non-existent. There's that should be said, but it's really important when you're doing some type of analysis of emptiness that you're very, very, very clear about the scope of what has been negated. I've said that the type of mountain that appears to your cognitive process doesn't exist. That I have not at all said there's no such thing as mountains. Mountains don't exist at all. But since it's difficult in the beginning to imagine what mountains might be if they don't exist the way that they ordinarily appear to you and the way that you normally think of a mountain existing, it's difficult to still maintain the existence of the mountain in some form. Well, no, there is a spoon. There is a spoon, and the spoon is not you. To flip the matrix thing on its head. And if you bend, the spoon doesn't bend at all. The spoon is not you, so bending yourself doesn't bend anything other than yourself. Again, there's so many weird cultural things out there. At some point, somebody asked me to do this, and I've been meaning to do it for a while, but it's a big project. At some point, I want to go through all of the popular culture references to Buddhism from I don't know, like 1990 up to present in popular media, and just talk about why they don't work. Because I've never actually seen an accurate representation of Buddhism in popular media that I can think of. There's only one Korean film about some type of demon being born on Earth that has some accurate Buddhist stuff in it. That was quite interesting. It's actually a really interesting film for a number of reasons. But even as far as I can tell, in some of the Asian films that I've seen and so forth, the representations as to what Buddhism is are like quite poor. It's quite bad. Right. Um, Best way to introduce meditation to toddlers. I wish I knew, to be honest. You know, I haven't, as far as I know, I can't think of anything. I haven't seen anything that I can think of. Um, I think the best thing, honestly, is to not that I'm saying you have to put your children through this kind of school, but a bit more like the what is it called? what is that? Montessori, like Montessori style learning, where you train a person to become absolutely fully engaged in what they're learning by letting them learn the things they want to learn first, right? I think that has to be balanced with a more conventional kind of learning schedule because there's stuff that you don't care about at all that you also need to learn. Um, but there really is something to this idea of getting people interested in knowing more about stuff by allowing them to pursue their interest in whatever they happen to be interested in. And I think with children, if you can, this is just my opinion, and I'm not a child psychologist or anything, but if you can help them take whatever that basic interest is in something and add one more piece so that the level of concentration that they have to bring to it is a little more, right? Like for example, with my little niece once, she was drawing uh, little bugs and stuff, and I said, "Do you know how to draw a triangle?" And I don't think I think she didn't. And so I taught her how to do a triangle and a square and I think a circle, something like this. And then I said, how can we put these together so that we can make bugs and all this, right? So now it becomes this exercise in concentration and memory and all of this other stuff. So I think just the natural process of trying to work with whatever your kids are interested in so that they're fully absorbed in the activity that they're doing. I think there's value in that. Think about it sort of, Jay, from like the Lohan perspective, right? You start with what's obvious. If you can get your kids, for example, if they're interested into something where they have to gain deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper awareness of themselves, their body, what it is their mind is doing, what it is their body's doing, that naturally trains you in concentration. And then when it comes time to try to train in concentration more formally, you're starting from here instead of starting from here. Because I guarantee you, like if one of your kids became a really phenomenal sketch artist, they would be pretty ready for training and concentration. Or if they became a ballerina or a like a taekwondo, maybe like not even a national contender, but like a regional contender training in taekwondo, the training in something relatively seriously and sort of taking them from that, oh, I'm really passionate about this, how kids do, they have their own things, and then continuing to feed that and go, oh, well, if you really want to learn drawing, we'll send you to somebody for drawing and they'll teach you all about drawing and you can become really good at this, and then just keep feeding whatever the things are so that they have to keep leveling up the demand of their attention and concentration to do whatever it is they're doing. And hopefully at some point that spills over from the short-term gratification system over to the long-term gratification system, right? Because you have to do a lot of stuff that sucks and isn't interesting to be able to get those long-term sorts of payoffs. All right. Yes, if you study hard, that can be a type of focused concentration. Um, although part of it is also that you're learning the skills and developing the character as a person that are required for you to make progress in your training. And this is really not talked about enough in Western Dharma settings. Like a Fortune 500 CEO has more of the qualities that are needed to develop as a Dharma practitioner than most people that turn up at Dharma centers. Because you need an iron will, you need great determination, you need like a deadly sort of discernment about what to do and not do. That is once I've decided to do this, this is what's happening, right? So there's nothing else happening other than this. But then also a lot of Fortune 500 guys, the reason that they're so successful is not just because they're like massively egoic driven pricks. It's because they know what they don't know. and they are entirely willing to go, yeah, I know nothing about that. Please tell me about this. Or let me bring in somebody that knows this because I can't possibly know everything. And so they already have, in a weird way, quite often, they have some humility, like intellectual humility. A lot of people that stumble into Dharma centers think that they're already half enlightened anyway. And, I mean, even some people that stumble through the stream from time to time, they're like lecturing the whole chat on the meaning of reality after being here for 4 seconds. It's a weird space that we live in terms of Dharma training. uh, so yeah, I mean, a big part of it is, I think, if you do help your children develop good character through feeding their passions by giving them maximum access, maximum benefit, maximum develop. What am I trying to say? Sort of the richest environment possible to pursue those passions, extracurricular or curricular, whatever it may be, so that they have to develop the character that is required to do anything at all, right? Because there's a common set of characteristics you need as a human being to be a success in stuff, including being able to do boring things over and over again that give you no payoff, and having great determination when it's painful, because it's not just boring, sometimes it really hurts. Like the 400th time, if you want to be a calligrapher, the 400th time or 4,000th time you've drawn that A on the paper, you've scribbled that A, or if you want to be a calligrapher with paint, it's painful. It's not a glorious process. The result is glorious, not the process. So getting them involved in things that they're actually interested in, and then helping them go down the road in that. And then, humbly, I'll say this because I don't want to tell anyone how to parent their kids, but I'll tell you about myself as an example. When I was coming up, my father, for a long time, basically wouldn't let me quit playing the clarinet. And at some point, he basically said, I'm not going to force you to do this anymore. It's up to you. You can quit or you can keep going. And of course, my kid brain at 12 years old is going, yeah, I'd much rather play video games than do this. I don't want to do this. And I quit. And I would love, as a 40-year-old man, to be able to play clarinet at a high level, and it would be totally programmed in my body and would never go away if I had just stuck with it. And so I think part of parenting that's quite often not uh, I think part of parenting that's quite often not emphasized much nowadays is, like, I think part of a parent's role is to look at the bigger picture your child can't possibly see and go, this is going to help you so much. Or having this experience where you've done something that you were kind of interested in but not fully interested in after the initial period, right? Because I loved clarinet in the beginning for years, from elementary school up until halfway through middle school. I love clarinet. And then I trained in music again. When I went after I graduated with my master's degree, I went back to school for a year and did classical voice, classical piano, jazz guitar. I trained in music theory. Anyway, so I went a fair ways down the road with music. If my father had just said, "You've picked this thing, now you do it," I would have done it because, you know, even I think at that age where you're starting to develop into your frontal lobe is getting its own ideas. Still, if your parents say, hey, look, this is the thing you picked, you're going to want this skill later. You just don't know it yet. You need to crack on. You need to carry on with it. Even if it's not great right now, you will love having this skill later. And having a discipline, something that you do that is a full on training of some kind, music, martial arts, dance, sports, whatever it is, having a full on discipline that is so that you understand what training is, so that you understand all of the moving parts of going from not having any capability, grinding, to use the word for a moment. I know this is a different use of the word, but grinding for 10 or 20 years at something to being an expert when you couldn't have possibly seen your way through from the beginning, right? A lot of intervening stages you could have never foreseen, a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of bullshit, and now you're here at the level of most people look at you and go, "Wow, it's like magic when you pick up that instrument." Or the way that you dance around in the ring when you're boxing is really unbelievable or whatever, right? So basically I think the sort of one thing is help your kids look at a lot of things, try a lot of things, and then at some point you say, "Hey, look, I'm going to help you do one thing that you want to do really well, really deep, and go as far as you want to go in it." And then once they've picked that thing, make them stick with it until they're no longer in your house. At least, right? Because that experience of having a training of some kind and building your character through training of something of some kind will serve them in terms of training and meditation later on, or training in anything. I think doing really anything in life, having trained in something, you're better prepared for everything else. You know, Plato in his Republic, when he talks about what you should do with kids, he says, well, you should train them in sports and you should train them in music because this changes the way that you think about everything and prepares you for everything else. And then after that, you train them in everything else. Okay. Grind culture. You know, I think there are some benefits to that. There are some benefits to grind culture there, but again, you know, it's the wrong object. It's 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 the wrong object. Uh, I think it's important to understand how, if you want to run a business, it's important to understand how a business is made and grown, and the amount of time and energy that will produce results in the business and all of that. You know, I think that's important. But if you think that when you have X amount of money in the bank account or something that you're going to be happy, that's not true. So most of, you know, my family's has a lot of entrepreneurs in it, and my father was happiest not when he had a business that was making a lot of money. That's not when he was happiest. He was usually fucking miserable when when ironically when the businesses were like built and running well, relatively speaking, and like making money and all that. You know when he was happiest? He was happiest when he was building the business. Isn't that interesting? All of the moving parts and the creativity and the decision making and taking the, you know, he opened something like 50 restaurants over the course of his career, and you know he only had a few at the end, but he opened and then sold, or whatever, a number of restaurants over his career. And he would, when he would get to open that box of skills and knowledge and all this stuff and use it at an extremely high level for, you know, 18 months or whatever when he opened a new place. And that's when he was most alive. And that's full engagement, right? Full engagement with what's actually happening. It's closer to basically training and meditation, where the creative play of mind starts to become available to you. In the West, we call it flow, although flow doesn't go nearly as far as what we're talking about. But that's closer to what happiness is than just chasing money because you think that once you have the best toys, you're going to be happy, or that once you have 10 women to do whatever, or 10 men to do whatever, or whatever your thing is, 10 of whatever your thing is, right? That this is going to make you okay. Blue, that's actually a really good point. And I've talked to my teacher, one of my teachers, about this a fair amount. To be alive, you have to have a certain amount of money unless you're living in the middle of nowhere or whatever, and you don't want to, you know, you don't care about being able to do stuff in the wider world. But yeah, it really is like that. At some point you hit a number, and then you more or less, based upon all the stuff you would normally do and want to do, you don't really have to think too much about the money. And that is a much more stable psychological situation than freaking out about money and going from month to month having no clue what the hell you're going to do, right? So I tell people this as lay people all the time. Of course you need to still do all your practices and stuff, but like you need to work hard on your career. You need to really become an expert in your area and work hard on your career and become an extremely competent and reliable person in a totally ordinary sense and improve your character so that the other people around you at your work think this is the guy who deserves the raise. This is the girl who deserves the upcoming position. Blah 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 blah. Become indispensable. Become a valuable contributing member of society and move up in whatever you're doing because you're absolutely right. Speaking for myself, for example, I've set sort of a number in terms of eventually with the donations coming from here and there and so forth, that if I was able to have X, then I don't have to worry about the money or talk about it or anything, and I'll be able to visit my teachers once or twice a year, and I'll be able to do the stuff my wife wants, because if my wife's not happy, then everything else is harder. Yeah, it and I don't know. I don't want to say too many things, but like my family knows a lot of wealthy people, and it is like that. Actually, my wife's father is quite wealthy. He works for Merrill Lynch, and he does quite well. And uh, it's kind of like that. It's like at some point you're not even really thinking about the money. You're just thinking about what do I actually want to do. And then if you can figure out before you chase money to some obscene degree, if you figure out here's what I want to do. I want to be able to take I want to be able to take 2 week-long retreats every year to do more practice, and I want to visit one of my teachers each year at least, to do more intensive training with my teacher or be in their presence or whatever. I'd like to be able to contribute X amount to a monastery every year so that monasteries will continue to exist and can teach the next generation of monks or nuns or whatever, right? If you don't have money, how are you going to support your teachers? How are you going to support the monasteries? How are you going to feed the hungry? How, right? And if you want to go on retreats and do all this stuff and travel around and meet all the great beings, that's going to take money. And if you want to have free time, ironically, you have to work really hard to have enough money to have time off, right? And if you do that, now you can do more practice. And now, winding it all the way back, if you develop better character, when you do your practice, it will work better because the person who's doing the practice is stronger, more capable, more determined, more, right? More. So if you're living in the real world, you have to spend enough time thinking about money and enough time thinking about your career and so on and so forth that you'll have enough resources to do all of the things you would conventionally like to do and all of the training you'd conventionally like to do and all the donations you'd conventionally like to make. And actually the Buddha there's a sutra on this. I'll put it on the screen because I don't think anyone believes me when I say this. Let me see. How to enjoy. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. I don't think anyone believes me when I say this, that this is a Buddhist teaching, because doesn't it sound like totally not a Buddhisty thing to say like, work hard at your job, blah, blah, blah. Okay, hold Window, no. Let's do web page. Window. Okay. Okay, my friends. The benefits. So this is a sutta from the Pali Canon. You're with me? Buddha in the Pali Canon, which everybody thinks, oh, this is the big one for monks and nuns, and it's all about monasticism, and there's really nothing there for lay people. The benefits to be obtained from wealth, from being a wealthy person. You ready? Here we go. Anathapindika, who was the Buddha's foremost donator, he built Jeta's Grove Monastery, was having a conversation with the Buddha. Here's how we begin. And the Buddha said, there are 5 benefits that can be obtained from wealth. There was a case where a disciple of the noble ones, who's that? Someone in the chat tell me what does it mean to be a disciple of the noble ones? As I continue. Using the wealth that is earned through his efforts and enterprise. Effort, hard work, and enterprise, business. Amassed through the strength of his arm. He did it himself. She did it herself. Piled up through the sweat of his or her brow. Righteous wealth, righteously gained. So this is all virtue. This is all virtue according to the Buddha. Provides himself with pleasure and satisfaction. You take your money and you enjoy yourself. And maintains that pleasure rightly. So you're not overdoing it. Not only this, because you have money, you provide your mother and father with pleasure and satisfaction. Maintains that pleasure rightly. So you give your mother and father nice stuff that they like without basically making their lives so overwhelmingly whatever with pleasure that everything else sort of falls apart for them, right? Because you could overdo it. Like you don't want to turn your parents into alcoholics or something. Then he provides his children, his wife, his slaves and servants, and basically anybody that's associated with that person in their household with pleasure and satisfaction, and maintains that pleasure rightly. So this is just the first benefit, that you can provide people around you with pleasure and yourself with pleasure, with wealth that has been provided through your own hard work, your own business, through your own strength, through the sweat of your brow. The second benefit, you can provide your friends and associates with pleasure and satisfaction and maintain that rightly. So now outside the household, right? So we were in the household before, mother and father, children, and so on. And now we're talking about beyond that, your friends and associates. So people that you associate with. Next. Well, this is interesting. With your money, you can protect people from bad stuff. You can help them protect themselves from floods and fires and bad rulers and thieves and so on and so on and so forth. So you can protect yourself and other people from these things that would cause big problems for you if you have some money. Furthermore, oblations. I believe this is again, if I'm not mistaken, the oblations here are referring to like providing all of the sort of hospitality that you would provide. And offerings, right, right. So I think these are traditional offerings because you're giving it to the dead too. So by the way, when you see people in Thailand and so forth, and you see them making all these offerings to the dead and blah blah blah, and people go, "Oh, that's not Buddhism." Yes, it is. It's right there in the Pali Canon. You know the Pali Canon, the one everyone keeps telling me is the earliest. There it is. Okay, carrying on. Finally, here we are, right? Institutes offerings of supreme aim, heavenly, resulting in happiness, leading to heaven, giving to contemplatives and Brahmins who abstain from intoxication and heedlessness who endure in all things in patience and humility, each taming himself, restraining himself, each taking himself to unbinding. So with money, you can donate to those who are doing serious practice. You can support those who are doing serious practice. If you don't have resources, you can't do anything to help these people who need resources to pursue the path full on. You see? So the Buddha, for his lay followers in particular, is not anti money. And he's not even anti you enjoying yourself and having a decent life in a conventional sense. I mean, the first three things he says are you can have pleasure for yourself and the people you like, and then the people outside your house that you like, you can provide them with some pleasure. And then you can stop bad things from happening because you have enough money to get good insurance and to buy a house that's not going to burn down and right. And then on top of this, you can make offerings that to devas and to kings and all of these other things that are providing other kinds of benefits. Let's just leave it at that. And then finally, fifth, you can support monasteries and monks and nuns and retreatants who want to go into retreat for 3 years but couldn't do that if they didn't have someone providing the food and the water and the logistical support and all this. You see? So this is the Buddha's advice. And there's more. The Buddha, I won't put it on the screen, but let me just hop back over here. But there's much more than this. The Buddha has all sorts of advice for lay people about what to do with money in terms of how to leave inheritance to your kids, how to be a good boss, how to be a good employee, how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife. There's all of this advice is in the canon. And to bring it down to the level, one of my teachers sort of put it like this, look, everything in this world unfortunately takes resources. And if you want to have enough resources to support your teachers in particular, you need to work hard at your job. And the better you do at your job. The other thing is, what is it about training your mind, for goodness sake? Making your mind more capable. What is it about making your mind sharper and faster and more capable than it's ever been? Way above average, according to the structure of this stuff. What is it about making your heart have only virtuous qualities? What about all of that makes it sound like you're going to become shit at doing your job? Can someone explain that to me? Like, why would you suddenly become a shit employee who can't do anything and fucks everything up? Because your mind is way more discerning. Your focus is way better. Your internal qualities allow you to do things other people couldn't do for longer than they could do them. This should make you better at everything you do, not worse. And vice versa. If you develop more character, more strength, more force of will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, more concern for others rather than just yourself through your work, not only will you advance in your career, which is good for you, but all of those qualities that you've developed, good qualities you've developed through your work, you take into practice and in fact can become practice. I hope I'm not I hope I'm not belaboring this too much, you know? It's just really important as lay people, and I haven't ever really gotten into it with everybody, but it's so important as lay people. Your career is so important. Yeah, it looks like maybe we lost David. Again, this doesn't mean you have to become a it doesn't mean you have to become a Fortune 500 CEO. It doesn't mean you need to make your whole life about money. It just means that in your job, work hard and care about other people, care about how it's going to turn out. The You know what? I think I will actually try to put this on the screen because this is important. I want to show you guys the advice that the Buddha provides on Buddhism at work. This is so important. This is so important, and people never believe me, and they always think, I don't know, that this is some weird thing that has nothing to do with Buddhism. Sort of like, I hate to say, but sort of like David, where he's going, oh, this is just some weird thing that has nothing to do with practice, and actually it's all about mindfulness, and that's the advice the Buddha gave. No, that's not the advice the Buddha gave. That's one aspect of advice the Buddha gave, but um, let me see if I can find this sutta. Ah, yes, yes, yes. Okay, we're on to something. So if you've never read this before, you've never seen this before, consider this like a bonus rumination for the day. Okay. Friends and colleagues, workers and servants, willing to start early and finish late. Okay. Right. I'm surprised you're all still here. Usually I start doing this and people are like, screw this, I'm out of here. This has nothing to do with Buddhist training. So good on you. Okay, check this out. So this is a, let me just scroll up. So this is a, again, Polycanon. Here we are once again in Access to Insight. This is one of the major Buddhist translation websites that's available for free. DN31. This is the Polycanon. Uh, Once again, this is mainstream Polycanon material. Okay. Okay. So he's talking to this young person and he's telling him basically how it is that you worship the various directions and what that means according to the Buddha rather than I think this might have been a Vedic practice or something. And so he says, listen, one of the ways that you worship the directions has to do with the relationship between employers and employees. So you're a uh, if you're an employer, if you're someone who for whom other people work, you should allocate work according to the aptitude of the people working for you. You should provide wages and food. You should look after people when they get sick. You should share special treats, and you should give reasonable time off work. Again, I mean, these are like pretty this is like pretty reasonable advice for how to run a business, right? If you look at this, this was I don't know 2,500 years ago, and these are most of the benefits that you find at a good company now, right? Where like you're put in jobs you know how to do, and you have insurance to take care of you if you get sick, and you have decent wages, and sometimes if you're working in the job, that food is provided, or at least you have time off to go and get food for a break and if the special treats, I'm assuming that would be more like, you get bonuses and stuff if things are going really well at work, and that you have reasonable time off, so you can go home and rest and do things besides work, right? Like this is the same advice you would find, I think, in most, roughly speaking, in most sort of modern journals on modern things on managing companies and managing people. Okay, so now what if you're an employee? So how is an employee working for a company that does all this stuff that we actually don't care about anymore and we take for granted and sue people if they don't do, right? What are we supposed to do to respect and reciprocate with compassion all of this benefit that they're providing to us? What do we do in return? We should be willing to start early and finish late when necessary. We shouldn't steal things from our job. We should do the work properly, and we should promote a good reputation for the place that we work. So we shouldn't run around telling everyone that where we work is a pile of shit and blah blah blah. which is what we do most of the time, right? We leave and we go, oh, they're such a terrible thing and they screw this up and they do this and they're not fair on that. And like mostly we only have negative things to say, you know? So this is the Buddha's advice. If you're working as a layperson in the real world, show up early, finish late when it's needed. Be a team player. Don't steal things that aren't yours from your job. Do your work really well. Don't do your work half-ass. Do it properly. And when you're not at work, don't smear your company's reputation. Don't smear your job's reputation. Don't smear the reputation of the place you're working. If you don't have anything good to say about it, what's the old adage? Don't say anything at all. Just say, "Oh, it's a job. It's a job, you know. I'm thinking about leaving." You know, there's this wonderful sutta somewhere where the Buddha says, a person of good character says little of the negative qualities of others and little of their own good qualities, and explains in great detail the good qualities of others and says, explains in great detail their own negative qualities. This is how you know I have no character. And then, of course, a person with no good character, a person of low character, the Buddha says, explains other people's faults and weaknesses in great detail, and explains their own good qualities in great detail, and explains the good qualities of others in small detail, and their own bad qualities in small detail, right? So, like this, if there's a bunch of bad qualities and whatever having to do with your work, the general advice is, say little, say less. And there's oh, it's a job. I'm thinking about maybe changing over to this or that. You know, don't smear the reputation of the places that you work. Now, if there's a moral issue and you need to handle a moral issue, handle moral issues, right? But yeah, don't share your special treats if you live in California. That's not a good idea. Okay, so anyways, long story short, my friends, as lay people, you live in the real world. You have responsibilities in the real world as parents, as employees, as bosses, as this and that relating to the real things that are happening in the world. So, in terms of money in particular, if you don't have enough resources to do the things that benefit others, and don't have enough resources to do the things that allow you to do your practice in the way that you want, that's a problem. So, it should be a priority to you to try to find a way to make enough and have enough resources to be able to do all the things you'd like to do in terms of your training and supporting holy beings and this sort of thing. Yeah, and it's a little bit of a shame that David left because on the other side, if it just turns out because of your karma or whatever that you can't put together a bunch of resources to do all this stuff, then you find communities that have members who do have resources, who want every member of the community to succeed and are willing to, right? This is the ecosystem. I was explaining this to a wonderful student from Hong Kong who was having a little bit of financial difficulty. And they felt really bad that they couldn't contribute financially to what I'm doing. And I said, don't even think twice about it. Don't don't let it rest on your shoulders or your heart for a single second that you can't contribute, because today you can't contribute and someone halfway across the world contributed so that I can keep doing this so that you can have it for free. You see, that's how it works. And then likewise, at some point, maybe that person falls on hard times. And now what you're working on in terms of your business, your life, whatever, it's really rocking. And you provide something, and now they get to do it for free. You see? So these communities of Dharma practice are meant to support the whole community, regardless of the amount of resource, to the best of our ability, of course, right? Yes, yes, you really should. You need to say, look, it's a religious obligation that I provide. I need to give $1,000 to a monastery every year, you see. On that note, I haven't talked about this, I think, since I started doing the YouTube thing seriously. But every year, usually around the turn of the year, like January-ish, I raise money for there's a particular monastery. So when we get there again, I'll be passing that information around. But they do a recitation of the Kangyur and the Tengyur, which is the complete sutra collection, Abhidharma collection, Vinaya collection, Prajnaparamita Perfection of Wisdom collection, and the Tantras, and all of the early Indian commentaries of all of the great Indian commentaries on that material. Basically, all of the original material that would have made its way into Tibet from the Sanskrit canon, and a little bit from the Chinese canon, and a little bit from other places as well. So they recite the entire canon basically, uh, and if you read about the benefits of this practice from a karmic perspective, you know, I mean, the Buddha says in some places that there are certain sutras that if you just read one line, you're in good shape for a long time, and so the idea of reading the entire canon becomes, in terms of meritorious activity, unfathomable. Okay. Yep, I saw that question earlier. I totally breezed over it though. Okay. What my experience has been with that sort of thing is that I've done a lot of rumination on various things. And sometimes I think, has this really done anything? Is that better than a Christian nationalist megachurch? Yeah, where you send 10% to one guy and he buys a jet. Like on my side, hopefully, humbly, hopefully this doesn't sound too bad, but like there's a certain amount of money I have to have for everything else to work, for the lights to stay on so that I can provide for my wife, so that I can travel to see my teachers, and so that I can continue getting training materials. And you know it does take a certain amount of money, and I really do want to be able to do this with all of you 70 hours a week until I'm dead. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people and teach people this stuff and lead retreats. And if there's enough value that I'm delivering in this to carry on doing that through donations, then fantastic. And if not, then I'll have to go back to doing something else. It is what it is. And then before you guys all knew me, I had already been doing this for like 10 years. I've been doing this like this for 2 months. But before, when I was working a job and blah blah blah, I had 5-10 hours a week tops to do all of this on top of my practices, which take a lot of time. So to be able to do it like this, I have to have donations. It's the only way to do it. There's not enough time to do both. So we'll see if it works. We'll see. If there's enough value, then people will contribute, and those contributions will be enough for me to not have to do anything else, and I can do this with all of you for however many hours a week there are, and I can do that until I get hit by a bus. Right. So when I've trained in rumination with various types of motivation creating meditations, many of those things I thought that they weren't doing anything. Like, I couldn't tell from day to day that they had done anything. But then I hit difficult circumstances and I found out that all of that work was doing something. I'm trying to think of an example that isn't too personal. I don't know. I'll put it in more general terms because there are some examples I can think of, but they're very, very personal. Um, when some very, very, very difficult things have happened over the last 5 years in my household, let's say, with people's health and stuff like this, I found that for some reason I was very well prepared internally to deal with all of that and was very helpful to those people and it seems to me did the right things to be helpful to them in the right ways at the right times and was able to do all of that, of course, under great distress, but was able to do all of that and maintain some the practices that I was doing at the time, which were also by themselves were incredibly, incredibly difficult practices. So yeah, I think it can be deceptive because you can do a lot of rumination on impermanence and a lot of rumination on the preciousness of a human rebirth and a lot of rumination on the intention to emerge, right? Renunciation, a very poor translation of this term, but the intention to emerge from samsara. You can do a lot of work on those things, and it can seem like you haven't done that much. And then you get to difficult circumstances, and you realize that you're able to carry through very, very difficult stuff with a sense of grace. Best ways to motivate yourself: Lam Rim. Read the Lam Rim and start at the first contemplation, which is not the contemplation of the guru as a Buddha. That's sort of a bonus that you work on because you'll need it for Tantra later on. But the first real contemplation, which is the preciousness of a human rebirth. And when you realize and recognize and fully acknowledge that we have an opportunity that is so absolutely unbelievably rare and precious that frankly it's like winning the lottery, flying home to see your family. The plane starts to crash, you jump out of the plane and get hit by lightning twice on the way down and land on Jeff Bezos's yacht for some reason. Like the odds are absolutely impossible. Like, I mean, I'm being a little bit silly, but I've actually run the numbers on some of those things. And the odds, according to the tradition, the odds of you getting this opportunity are better than that. As funny as that example is, but like you getting struck by lightning twice after winning the lottery twice after getting in a plane crash and living as the one person who lived out of, you know, hundreds of people who die in plane crashes, being that one person who lived and walked away with it. Like the odds of you getting this opportunity, according to Buddhism, are so infinitesimally small you can't even compare the two, really. The comparison is beyond fathoming. In fact, since we're all hanging around and I have nothing better to do, I don't know how many of you like math. Math is maybe not that interesting, but I was always a math and science guy, right up until I wasn't. Um, okay. If you'd like to get a little bit of insight into I don't know. Okay. Okay. We'll just go for it. All right. So this is a document that I put together to contemplate the preciousness of a human rebirth, hence the name, oh, which you can't see. Let me just slide that down for a second. Oh, that doesn't help. Well, in any case, this is the preciousness of a human rebirth. And then as you can see there, it's 173 pages. Okay. So here we are on page 82, talking about the rarity of what actually is a precious human rebirth. So I started just thinking through, well, what are the odds actually of by accident getting this opportunity? So according to research, the human population on Earth will stabilize at about 11 billion people. It's not going to keep going up because people die, right? Only about 3 million people will be born each year. There are 2,500 years left where the Buddha's current teachings will function, right? The Buddha's teachings will continue to exist, but they won't produce realizations. They won't produce Buddhist realizations after 2,500 years has ended, according to Buddhism. So by this math, based upon whatever it is, a 20 year generational gap, blah, 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 there are only, between here and the end of the Buddha's teachings working, there are only 7.5 billion possible human lives. In other words, if you have to take rebirth a few more times as a human and you're trying to keep in contact with these teachings, you only have 7.5 billion opportunities between here and the teaching's not working anymore. So again, this sounds pretty good, right? It sounds like, well, actually, you have a lot of opportunity, maybe, right? That's kind of how it sounds. But let's take a slightly different approach. Uh, so when is the universe going to end? Well, some say it could be 2.8 billion years from now. Some say it could be 20. Uh, so let's say that within a universe, right, 1,002 Buddhas of this fortunate kalpa will occur on a regular schedule within the remaining 19 million years. Oh, sorry. There will be if there's 20, sorry, if there's 20 billion years left. Are you following? If there's 20 billion years left and each Buddha's teachings only lasts for 5 to 10,000 years, then there is 19, call it 20 million years between Buddhas. If the universe is going to end in this period of time, and this is the fortunate eon in which there are basically 1,000 Buddhas, then there's about 20 million years between Buddhas. The average human life is 72.6 years. So even if you had a human rebirth, every single rebirth between here and the next human rebirth, you would have to live 274,900 human lives without the teachings if you miss the current opportunity. Let me go over that one more time with a little bit more crispness. All right. If there is 20 billion years until this current universe ceases to exist, and if we accept Buddhist cosmology that there are 1,002 Buddhas that will exist on a regular schedule of intervals, and if each Buddha's teachings only lasts 5,000 years or so, then between each Buddha's appearance, there's about 20 million years. Each human life is only 72.6 years, to keep it simple, because we could do a lot of weird stuff with numbers here based upon Buddhist cosmology, but let's keep it simple. Which means that you would have to live 274,900 human lives between this Buddha and the next Buddha if you miss this Buddha's teachings. So if you don't do it with this Buddha's teachings and you don't end up in a pure land, even if you stayed a human being for every life in between, which is not going to happen, you'd have to live, let's call it 275,000 human lives without the teachings if you miss this opportunity. And you have 2,500 years left where these teachings are going to work. Right. Now, if you continuously take rebirth as a human being with an average lifespan of 72 years, then you have a maximum of 68 human lifetimes to interact with the current Buddha's teachings in a form where they'll actually work. And as time goes on, it'll get harder and harder to make them work from lifetime to lifetime, which is part of the degeneration of the Buddha's teachings. And yeah, welcome to Buddha motivational statistics. So you're already halfway through. Part of the reason it's so hard to make the teachings work, part of the reason there's so much bullshit out there about meditation, part of the reason that people spend 30 years doing vipassana and it doesn't work, and then they encounter real teachings and they work in 6 months, is that the teachings are being mixed with a whole bunch of nonsense that doesn't do anything, doesn't work, doesn't help that much. And this is part of the decline of the teachings, where people hear more about the Dharma and they learn less Dharma and they accomplish less Dharma. So these 68 lifetimes, each lifetime from here until the end of the teachings, it'll get harder and harder and harder and harder to realize the teachings. And some of you already know how hard it is to realize the teachings as it is. Uh, sorry. So 68 human lifetimes from the time these teachings started. Now, apologies, there are only 35 left. We've only got 35. We've only got 35 left until they don't work anymore. So most of the Buddhist systems say you only need like maximum like 15 lifetimes or so. So we do have time. Like even if you were the dumbest sort of Dharma guy or girl, you have plenty of time as long as you don't screw it up and not do the stuff you should do and end up in a hell realm for like 14 eons before you're a human again. As long as you keep your ethics and you train hard in this lifetime, you have enough lifetimes to get the work done. But if you miss the opportunity, right, to use these 35 human lifetimes that are coming up to finish the process of training, the next Buddha won't be here for 20 million years, which is the equivalent of 275,000 human lifetimes. So even if you were born a human 275,000 more times between here and the next Buddha, if you miss this opportunity, it's going to be 20 million years of waiting. So the idea that this is like kind of rare, according to Buddhist cosmology, is the understatement of the century. Let me see if there are any other number nuggets. Ah, yes. Oh, man. I don't know how much these numbers help if you haven't thought about them. Oh, okay. So just without talking too much about all the numbers, not every human life is a precious human life. So I did some numbers here, right? A precious human life is one in which, let's just simplify it and say, you have all the conditions you need to actually train in the Dharma, and you actually do train in the Dharma. Okay, that's a precious human life. It's not just being born a human being. So there are 7.8 billion human beings on Earth. Only 100 million of them are Buddhist. Only 100 million of them, even though they could have a precious human rebirth, they don't, right? They just have a normal human rebirth. Now, if we look at the odds of this, and I'm skipping a couple steps, but then the odds, this is less than 1%. The odds are 0.001282%, which means that if we use the worst possible number, that 1 out of 34 trillion human lives, relatively speaking, over a long period of time, if we're looking at sort of this larger period of time, in which you could have been born a human being, but you didn't have this, you didn't have that, blah, 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 all these things we were just talking about. 1 out of 34 trillion opportunities is a precious human rebirth. These are much worse odds actually than winning the lottery. On top of this, this is a fortunate kalpa. This is a fortunate eon. So in this eon, in this universe, there's going to be 1,000 and something Buddhas, 1,020 Buddhas or 18 Buddhas, something like this. Some eons, some entire kalpas, some entire universes have no Buddhas. Some only have one, some only have two, some only have three, four, or five. So we're existing in a time when you might have to live 475,000 human lifetimes without the teachings if you miss the opportunity. But let's say that you went to a lower realm and missed the entire window of the fortunate kalpa of this time to meet another Buddha later on. There could be hundreds and hundreds and thousands and millions of trillions of lifetimes before you meet it again, because not every kalpa, not every universe is a fortunate kalpa. So the odds are already like unbelievably small. One chance, if it's happening randomly, one chance out of 34 trillion chances. And this is a good eon. This really is. This is Jones's wager. Okay. Like when people ask, sometimes they do, they go, well, why haven't you attained enlightenment already? You've had forever. First of all, the opportunities are extremely small, and most people, even when the opportunity's there, don't take it. And there's the chance that like everything is weighed against you in taking the opportunity. There's no necessity that you will get out. And it's not just a matter of odds, it's a matter of putting the right causes in place. And if you don't do that, it doesn't happen. And according to Buddhist cosmology, it's already been happening forever, which means it could continue to happen forever. So there's the chance, to do it in Pascal's wager, that you could be stuck doing this bullshit and suffering and being in pain over and over and over again forever. That isn't it's not a non-zero possibility, right? So in a fortunate eon, you have 1 in 34 trillion chance just to be sitting where you're sitting now. And that's a fortunate eon. In an unfortunate eon, there's no chance. And in a sort of normal eon that isn't unfortunate but isn't great, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chances. And then there are hundreds of millions of lifetimes in between those chances. My goodness, right? Here's a nice quote from the Mustard Seed Sutta. You ready? One more math for you. Someone asks, how long is an eon? And the Buddha says this. How long, the monk says, how long, Lord, is an eon? Long, monk. I love the Buddha when he says stuff like this. Long, monk, is an eon. It's not easy to count so many years, so many hundreds of years, so many thousands of years, so many hundreds of thousands of years. And the monk says, okay, but is it possible? Can you give me an analogy, right? Like maybe at this time they didn't even have a word for how many years this is. And so he says, well, can you give me an analogy for how many years this is? And he says, okay, monk, here we go. Suppose there were a fortress, a league long, a league wide, a league high, full of mustard seeds. And if you don't know how big a mustard seed is, go look at one on the internet. Full of mustard seeds, not just full of mustard seeds, but packed tightly within the vessel. And a man would come along once every 100 years and would take from it a single mustard seed. He said, more quickly would that great heap of mustard seeds waste away and be consumed by that effort, but not an eon. That's how long an eon is. So then I thought, okay, this word league means yojana. It comes from the Rig Veda and one of the Puranas. But the Purana, actually, that shouldn't be there because the Puranas come later. But it comes from the Rig Veda. So it doesn't have a definitive measurement, but they've done their best then to reconstruct this, and it's somewhere between 2 miles and 18 miles is what a yojana is. Okay? So to give you some sense of how big that vessel is that he's describing, 1 human mile or 1 mile is 17 American football fields. So do your best to think about a football field with like a stadium around it, right? Imagine 17 of those put together. And then 17 of those turned sideways and stacked on top of each other. And that's the vessel into which you're putting mustard seeds and filling it up. So then I thought, okay, that's a certain number of miles. That's actually about the size of Venice, Italy, the city. So if you took all of Venice, Italy, and made it into a box and filled it with mustard seeds, an eon would take longer to exhaust an eon than a person taking one seed out of that vessel every 100 years. They would finish that task before the eon was finished. Here's another analogy. Monks. If a single person were to wander and transmigrate for an eon, just one eon, they would leave behind a chain of bones, a pile of bones, a heap of bones, as large as Mount Vepula. If someone were to collect them and they were not destroyed, the accumulation of a single person's bones for an eon would heap on par with that mountain. So imagine the Himalayas, right? I'm going to pull that up too. So here are the Himalayas. Here are the Himalayan mountains. Across, here's India, the country. Tibetan Plateau and China, all of this up here. One of the largest mountain ranges in the world. And the Buddha says, if we just took your bones, just your bones only, and collected them together, the mountain it would form after you had lived an eon worth of lives would be bigger than the Himalayas. So to say that the opportunity to train in this material is rare, it's a rare opportunity, is so far from communicating the rareness of the opportunity that it's not even close, right? That you could fill all of Venice with mustard seeds, take one mustard seed out of the entire greater Venice area once every 100 years. Once every 100 years. So this is like a long human life, right? I don't think that's by accident. And that you would live all of those human lifetimes, basically, and exhaust all of those before an eon had finished. And and that actually makes sense, right? There are 20 million years between Buddhas if we believe modern cosmology in terms of how long the universe is going to last. There's 20 million years between Buddhas. In a fortunate eon. In an unfortunate eon, there's no Buddhas. And in one, sometimes you get one. So there could be countless, countless unbelievable numbers, unimaginable numbers of lives between you getting to do this again. If you, for example, fell into the animal realm and spent the next 1,500 years as like a cricket and a cockroach and a fish and a dog, and then you were reborn as a human again, okay, it's now you have 275 thousand human lifetimes to wait again until the next Buddha of this fortunate eon arrives. 20 million years to wait. Have fun. Anyways, so the preciousness of a human rebirth. No, the historical Buddha is number 18, 19. Let me check. And this is also in the Pali Canon, by the way. But again, remember, the previous Buddha would have been 20 million years ago, somewhere else in this universe, probably not on Earth. Buddhist, let me see, Buddhist, previous Buddhas, Pali Canon. Oh, 28. Am I still? Oh, I'm not shared. Sorry. Yeah. So 28 Buddhas. 28. So I think the current Buddha was number 28. That makes sense. Ah, here we are. So these are the previous ones. And as far as I understand, um, when we're talking about the world systems of Buddhism, I don't think we're talking about all of these Buddhas being born like on Earth. I think we're talking about these Buddhas being born somewhere in the universe. You know? I mean, sometimes they talk about all of the Buddhas being born under that one particular Bodhi tree in India, or what have you, or in one particular area. And there are actually some locations on Earth for sure where a previous Buddha was, according to the current Buddha. There was at least one other Buddha on this planet. Would have been whatever 20 million years ago. Um, but uh, yes. So, anyways, long story short, lots of Buddhas have already been here. We basically know nothing about any of them besides what we know through the Buddha's clairvoyant knowledge of those previous Buddhas. So, how do you motivate yourself? What's the best motivation? There's all of this information is in the canon to help motivate you to do stuff. So when you study Lam Rim, you study in part the preciousness of a human rebirth. And then you study the fact that it's not going to last very long. You death will happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. And the only thing you can take with you is your ethics, good character, karma, mental imprints. That's all you get to take with you. Everything else you leave behind. Let me say that again. You're going to die. How do you know? All of the great beings have died. Even the mountains waste away. Even even the things that keep you alive can kill you. If you drink too much water, you can die. Right? If you eat too much of certain foods, you'll die. If you sit down too long, you'll die. If you stand up too long, you'll die. It's like almost everything will kill you if you do too much of it. Your clothing can kill you. The building that you're in can kill you. The car you're driving can kill you. Almost everything can kill you. Almost everything that sustains your life can kill you. So you're going to die. Not only that, the time of death is uncertain. You don't know when it's going to happen. Isn't it true that if you go to a graveyard, you find graves for people sometimes even that weren't even born yet? They died in the womb. And you find people there who died at 122 years old or whatever. So you don't know when you're going to go. People go at all ages. Not only that, isn't it true that sometimes healthy people, relatively speaking, they just seem to die for no reason? that they were walking along, they seemed healthy in every way, and then their liver just stopped working, or their heart just stopped working, or some freak thing. They inhaled some chemical as they were walking down the road and had there's lots of TV shows about this. So you don't know when you're going to go. You're definitely going to go, but you don't know when. And then on top of that, the only thing you can take with you, can you take your family with you? No, you can't. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. You can't bring your family with you. Some people do orbit, let's say. They tend to orbit in a constellation or sort of a solar system of other people, sort of, where you tend to be reborn around the same people again and again. You tend to orbit each other in terms of rebirth and re-encounter each other again and again in little groups. That's true. But when you see that person again, you're not going to know that you knew them before unless you do a lot of training. So you can't take your family, you can't take your wealth, you can't take your body, you can't take all the books. All you can take is your good karma. All you can take is your good character. All you can take is your realizations. That's the only luggage you can take with you. So you have this incredibly precious opportunity. Why is it not just rare? Why is it precious? It's precious because as a human being, you can go wherever you want. You want to go to a heavenly realm? The Buddha wrote a prescription for that. Meditate on loving kindness and be ethical. And it probably also helps to form relationships with the types of beings who are in those realms. Sounds a lot like Christianity to me. Charity, ethics, humility to God, right? Loving love. This is the prescription for heavenly rebirth. Isn't it? So you want to go not just to a heavenly rebirth, you want to go to nirvana? Okay, the Buddha wrote a prescription for that. You want to not only go to nirvana, you want to go to enlightenment? There's a prescription for that. Human rebirth is precious because anywhere you want to go, any rebirth you want to attain, any state of meditation you want to achieve, to ascend through various levels of consciousness, etc., they're all available to us. And not all forms of life are like that. Not all forms of sentient rebirth are like this. It's even more precious because, from a tantric perspective, not all life has the type of subtle body and energy system that we do that gives you access to extremely subtle states of consciousness. Human beings are actually extremely rare, according to tantric theory, in this way. Like even the devas, for example, beings in heavenly realms and even the pure realms. Like you could take rebirth in a pure realm, you're going to attain enlightenment in that realm or immediately after leaving it. But there's no tantra, so it takes forever. It takes a long time. As a human being with this body and this subtle energy system and all of this stuff, you can access the subtlest aspects that make up your being and turn a process that would have taken kalpas. Now you know what a kalpa is. That would have taken kalpas, and you can turn it into a process that takes 15 lifetimes at the most, or 17, something like that. As one of my teachers said, and I agree very much, I'll sign in blood for 17 lifetimes. Thank you very much. Like after limitless lifetimes of suffering, I'll sign today 17 lifetimes, no problem. And that's within that 35 lifetime window where the teachings still work. Now you know also. So you can see how the logic builds on itself. Even if you're the slow horse, there's still time. Even if you're the tortoise instead of the hare, there's still time. This is why it's precious. And if in this lifetime you make some progress in that stuff, and then you die and you're reborn, according to the great masters, because you were like, let's call it, you weren't a great being, you weren't a great practitioner, but you were okay. You'll be reborn as a middling practitioner next time. Hello, sweet and sour. Welcome. So next time you'll be like, okay, you'll be like me, you know? I'm not great, but I'm like, I'm okay. You'll be an okay practitioner. And then they say after that, after really putting your heart into being an okay practitioner, next time you'll be reborn as one of these people who's a great practitioner. So within a few lifetimes, you'll be one of the greats. It's fantastic. You know, again, I'll sign in blood for that here today. So this is what they say, you know, great practitioners who can actually see what happens, supposedly. They say, you know, why is it so precious? Because you have like 35 more lifetimes where all the teachings will still work. That's within the window of the longest time period it would take for you to use the best teachings with this system you have to accomplish the goal. So you're in great shape as long as you train. As long as you train hard, keep your ethics in shape, just carry on, you know, take your precepts, keep your vows, carry on. And you're headed the right way. And there's time. But if you miss the window, man, is there a long time until you get another window. There is a huge amount of time until you get another shot at this. 3 down, 14 to go. Yeah, if you're on the slow track. But hopefully some of us they say there are sort of like 4 categories, you know. The slowest one is like 15 lifetimes or 17 lifetimes, something like that is the slow guy who uses tantra, for example. And then the next one is 7 lifetimes. That's sort of the middling person. And then the next one is 3 lifetimes. And that one's doing pretty good, right? That's a sort of like the one we were just talking about a moment ago. And then the fastest is in a single lifetime. And amongst those people who can do it in a single lifetime are those people that can do it in something like roughly about 3 years. So this is how powerful the system is that we have as a human being in particular. Because if you were reborn in a pure realm or in a deva realm, according to tantric theory and Buddhism, you don't have this subtle body system in the same way that allows you to do these practices that massively accelerates the process of attaining enlightenment. And because of that, you have to spend a huge amount of time creating a lot of other conditions, et cetera, so that you can head down the path in a way that's much slower. If you went to the pure realms, yeah, you're going to attain you know, that's probably a good place to go. You're going to attain the goal, but it takes longer. So as a human being, especially while we're here and you know, we've got a few years left maybe, you have this incredibly precious opportunity to use this unit to the maximum effect to make progress heading down the path. So it's rare and it's precious. And then, not only that, as we were just saying, death is certain, the time of death is uncertain. The only thing that matters at the time of death is practice. Death is certain, the time of death is uncertain. The only thing that matters at the time of death is practice. Death is certain, the time of death is uncertain. The only thing that matters at the time of death is your practice. The only luggage you can take with you is your realizations and your karma. Death is certain. You will die. The time of death is uncertain. You don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen anytime. It could happen while you're listening to this live stream. It could happen while I'm giving this live stream. Why do you think I say, hope to see you again? Why do you think I have this mug? Because it really is like that. And the only as a traveler, as a listless wanderer, amongst the realms of rebirth, the only luggage you get to carry with you is in here. Yeah, and Dominic, but it's not just your karma. I mean, in a way, I suppose it is just your karma, but it's helpful to think about it not just as action, but your character. Whatever you have carved on your heart in terms of good qualities, you get to carry forward. Yes, that's karma, but if you train yourself in humility, if you train yourself in compassion, if you train yourself in love, if you train yourself in concentration, you get to carry those good qualities forward. Yes, because of karma, but I think it's important as a practitioner. You guys kill me in the chat over here. But it's important as a practitioner to think about it as your good uh, the the qualities you're carving on your heart get to come with you. And then the baggage you're taking, the bags you've packed are the karma for the journey. It's the provisions for the journey. Did you pack not killing? And did you pack supporting life? Because in the future, you'd like to have a long life and good health. That'd be important. So I want to have some good karma related to long life and good health in my luggage. Did you pack some money in the luggage? In other words, were you generous in the past? Because you need that in the luggage so that in the future you have resources so that you can do all the stuff you need to do in terms of your training. Did you pack uh, not committing sexual misconduct? Right? Because if you were committing a lot of sexual misconduct, then your relationships will be all screwed up in the future. And this is going to cause problems in terms of your practice, not having reliable friends, not having reliable relationships, causes big problems for you. So you want to pack good relationships in the luggage. Really, really strong, loving, powerful, supportive relationships that drive you further towards virtue. Did you pack in your luggage the truth? Because if you just packed like a whole load of horse shit in there, horse shit and bricks, that's going to be a problem when you open your luggage later. To chaos fuel, to answer your question, your luggage is your karma. That's what you're carrying with you to the next life. And most of your good karma and merit, I've done some of that practice, or at least similar practices. I haven't done a huge amount. It's a good practice, though, Dominic. So in your luggage, it would also be good to have an extremely sharp mind. So you need to not screw with your mind and make it dull. So now we've just talked about the 5 precepts, right? We've talked about not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct, not lying, and not consuming intoxicants. The reason you have those 5 vows is so that you've packed your luggage with the minimum luggage you need to to continue making progress on the path in your next lifetime. Right? That's the minimum luggage you're going to need to carry on with this. Not only that, along with your precepts, didn't you take another commitment? What was that other commitment? Come on, help me out here, people. You took your precepts and what else did you take? What do you take along with your precepts? There's another commitment. What else are you packing in your luggage? Your refuge vows. Why? Yeah. Okay. Jay got it. You probably, with the delay, you probably said it before I said it. That's right. So that in the future, you have a long life with good health. You have the resources you need. You have the relationships that are stable. You have the truth and people who tell you the truth. You have a sharp mind. You have the basics. What are you missing? You're missing the triple gem. You're missing the Dharma. So you take refuge commitments, refuge vows. So now, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, you have a connection to this. You're putting that in your luggage. So now in your karmic luggage, you're taking with you to your next life the minimum required stuff to have all the conditions you need to carry on in your next life. So now you're not the blind turtle anymore. You're not accidentally taking a precious human rebirth, you're building it on purpose. You're packing your bags, getting ready for it. You see it? So this is the brilliant thing. In Buddhism, Atisha's Lamp for the Path is a brilliant text by the great saint. Where are my bodhisattvas at? So there's he says, look, he says there are 3 levels of motivation as a Buddhist. The first one is just wanting to have a good rebirth. And this should make sense to you, right? You want to have, you want to put into place all of the, you want to put into place all the luggage that you need, pack all your bags that you need so that you can take a good rebirth again. And then once you've taken a good rebirth, that not only do you have a nice rebirth, but you can carry on with your training. So that's the first level of motivation. The next level of motivation is that you want to attain nirvana because that's a permanent good result for you. The third one is you want to attain enlightenment because this is a permanent good result for all other beings. So when people say, "Oh, you need to have self-compassion," no, you don't need to have self-compassion. Compassion isn't aimed at you. Even if you go back to the path of purification, Venerable Buddha Gosha, quintessential text on defining mental states in Buddhism in the Pali Canon, what does he say? Metta, metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion, those are aimed at other people. All of this BS that's come up recently about, oh, as a Buddhist, you need to train in having compassion for yourself and being nice to yourself. And like, there's nothing like this in Buddhist psychology. It's just not there. Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble. And it's not there in the Mahayana material either. And Buddha Gosha goes so far as to say that meditating on your own desire to be happy isn't a path meditation. It's because you already want to be happy. It's not something you need to get better at. What you need to do is aim your current desire for happiness towards actual happiness instead of at bullshit that doesn't produce happiness. Right? So right now you have a desire, you want to be happy, but you aim it at things that don't make you happy, like pleasure and avoiding pain. Simply avoiding pain and pursuing pleasure doesn't make a person happy. On the other side, if you take that same desire for happiness and aim it at an actual source of happiness like nirvana, then that desire will carry you to nirvana. And then we call it renunciation. We call it the desire to emerge from samsara, the desire to emerge, right? So that's a path meditation, but simply thinking about, oh, I want to be happy too. I don't want to suffer too. I don't want meh, meh, meh. I don't know where this comes from. It's not part of Buddhist practice or Buddhist psychology. Self-compassion and self-love is not part of Buddhist psychology, which is not to say that you don't care about your own interests. But the Buddhist point about this is you already care about your own interests. And if you need to forgive yourself for some dumb stuff that you did, we have practices for that. But metta practice and karuna practice isn't the practice for that. We have other practices for that, like purification. Okay. Hello, Shashank. Hello, hello. Stu, hello. Let me go to Stu's question from way back. Can we talk about, oh, thank you, thank you. Oh yes, since this has turned into basically Q&A time unintentionally, I'll do my Q&A announcements. So super fun announcement first. So I went to a little company and had them make 18 Lohan stuff for the 18 Lohan people. Because if you're doing martial arts stuff, you've got to have a T-shirt for it, right? This is the rule. And so This is the 18 Lohan hoodie, and there's our little logo on there. I'm quite pleased with how they turned out. I think it looks super cool. So in that regard, let me just jump in and say for those who will be happening through, because now since we've gotten this far, I'll probably be here at least 30 more minutes. So Instagram. I don't think I'm on Instagram. Um, but I am Shawshank. I'm on Discord. I'll get to you on Discord if you sent me a message. So my quick commercial break, as I'm wont to do. So I teach all of this for free. Everything that I teach is available somewhere for free. No, no, no. Don't worry, man. Don't worry. Yeah, it means three. So hold on, let me land the plane first. So everything I teach for free, or I have a free version of it somewhere. If it's my teaching, if it's something that I'm doing, I do this. I do this, making phone calls and talking to people about their practice, doing live streams, making content, et cetera, et cetera. I do this in the ballpark of 70 hours a week, sometimes more. And so, because of that, I don't have time to do anything else. And I want to keep doing it this way. I want to keep helping people and doing these live streams and leading retreats and being able to offer all of that for free to anyone who couldn't afford to do it at that particular time. To do all of that, I need your help. If you're hearing this or watching this at some point, I do need your help if you're able, because I do everything based upon donations, basically. And there's a bunch of different ways to contribute. You can just straight up send a donation through the links that are in the description, which maybe, I don't know who's here in the chat. Maybe Jay, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could pop that into the different ways to donate into the chat. They're already in the description for the video, but then in addition to that, I'm building a meditation community through a company called School. So all of my school material, quote unquote, is already available for free on YouTube. But what I'm doing with that community is I'm getting between 100 and 200 meditators together from whatever backgrounds they happen to be in to train more seriously in the types of techniques that I teach. And I'll be parking my book, the full book from which the little excerpts I have on my videos for meditation. I'll be parking the full book for that in the school course. And also, once we have 100 people, we're all going to support each other financially, is my hope in doing long term retreat. So, how would that work? Basically, once someone's been in the community for a period of 1 year or 2 years as a contributing member to the community and has done one retreat in my techniques so that they're a competent person in those techniques, uh, I will talk with them, each person individually that wants to do retreat of 2 weeks to 4 weeks. I'll talk to each one individually. I'll talk to whoever your teachers are in the lineage that you want to do that retreat, and uh, we'll figure out how much money is required, right? Because if you're going to do 2 weeks or a month of retreat, that takes a lot of money. And let's say it's $1,000, right? Let's say it's $1,000 for you to go into retreat for that period of time. My hope is that with the school community people who are more serious, right, and are basically want to do this idea, that here's what you would do, right? Think about it like this. You have 100 or 200 people that are like your support network for long-term retreat. When you need $1,000 for the first time to go do retreat for a month, all of us, if there's 200 of us, will chip in $5, and there's your $1,000. And if we send 2 or 3 people into retreat every month, then each of us will have to cough up, let's call it $40. I mean, how many of you out there who are long-term meditators would be overjoyed to help send a serious practitioner into retreat for a month for $40? By the way, that would probably send 3 people in our community into retreat per month if we're all willing to chip in $40. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, that's so cool. It's so incredible. So if you join the school community, that's a great way to support me from month to month. And eventually, once there's enough of us, I'll start doing these sorts of things where people who want to do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in retreat will figure out how much money it is. Those funds will go directly to the place that they're doing the retreat, because these will have to be retreats led by an organization for reasons that hopefully will make sense to you without me having to explain why that should be the case. In brief, there's no way to know if you like took a trip to Tahiti instead of doing your retreat unless we pay the organization where you're doing the retreat, right? No, I mean, again, $40 is I agree, is a lot of money in some places, but think about it in a smaller scale. Maybe you can chip in $2, but somebody in a different currency can chip in $50 because for them their currency is worth more or whatever. But when it comes time for you, Shawshank, to do retreat and you want to do 3 weeks, it's going to cost everybody peanuts. For you, it would have been an impossible amount of money to travel to Japan and spend 3 weeks in a Zen monastery with a teacher that you've always wanted to do a retreat with. But the community who have currencies all over the world chip in $5 each. And now you can go do that retreat. You understand? So, like, this is the big idea that we're all supporting each other at whatever level we can. And if there's enough of us, there will be enough money. And if we all chip in whatever we can, it should be enough money to make these things possible for people. Things we couldn't do alone because we'll spread the cost around. You see? And then over a 3, 4, 5 year period, each of us will get to do at least, I hope, with the community support, one retreat that's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You see? So this is my hope. This is what I'm trying to build. One, if you join the school community, you're supporting me from month to month, which is very, very helpful. Two, you're training with me much more seriously. Three, I'm building this community of people who will financially support other practitioners in the community when they do long-term retreat. That's the idea. Okay. Then the final way you can support and contribute, I'm adding all of my material again that's already available for free to Neil Ripsky's Lohan Palm course. So that's now in the chat over there, wherever. So Lohan Palm, for those of you who don't know, is a Shaolin-based system that combines a huge number of things. I just updated the website, by the way, with a giant syllabus for all the stuff that we teach in that course, or Neil teaches in that course. So underneath the small description, there's a drop down now, and that drop down is like, I don't know, 4 pages or something. That's all the stuff that he knows and he's going to teach. So Lohan Palm is of course, it's a martial art, right? So it has the martial art aspect, but it's also basically Buddhist yoga. So instead of having a Hindu yoga system, you'd have a Buddhist stretching, opening the body, fixing the wind system, the chi system, the prana system, whatever you want to call it. There's a Buddhist version of this that comes through Shaolin, and it's called Doyin. On top of that, it has muscle tendon changing, which is it's like yoga on steroids. It's just doing a lot more with the body and making it much stronger, and it's preparing you to do things with the energy body in a very powerful way. And then same thing, there's something called silk reeling that's doing something quite similar, but it's also connecting your body up in ways that are very helpful for seated practice and so on and so forth. So Lohan Palm is a complete system for training your body, your energy body, or the vital forces of the body, and your mind, so that all these different parts that are making you up are all headed in the direction of the results of the practice. What makes it really unique is that normally to get all of those elements together, you have to take tantric empowerments in one of the tantric lineages. That's where those techniques are mainly sort of squirreled away, like acorns. Acorns that most people don't even know are there. But Buddhism does have physical yogas, and Buddhism does have energy body practices of all kinds. But normally they're hidden behind empowerments. In the Shaolin lineage that Neil Ripsky has, they're not hidden behind empowerments. So if you're interested in all of that, qigong, neigong, the energy body system, etc., that's all part of a huge flow chart of practices that basically allow you to do a huge amount of the tantric stuff without having to take empowerments, which is pretty cool. In particular, if you, like, let's say you were a Theravadan practitioner and you didn't want to go down the tantric road for various reasons, right? Yeah. So long story short, I can't say enough good about that course, and Neil and I are splitting the income from that course. So that would be another way to support me also. Even though what I'm teaching in that course, I'm also teaching elsewhere for free, as I do with everything else. It's an awesome, awesome course. Um, cannot recommend it highly enough. A few of you are doing it already, and I think enjoying it. So that's my commercial. I'll now go back to answering questions. So if you'd like to support me, send a donation through, join the school, join Lohan Palm, um, and there will be retreats coming up too related to Lohan Palm and meditation. Neil and I are going to do joint retreats. So people who are doing Lohan will have an opportunity to meet me in real life. Because normally I do my retreats remotely because it's good for you to do retreat at home. But if you're doing physical stuff, you need to be in person. So if you'd like to meet me in person one day, I'm going to be doing Lohan / meditation retreats probably starting next March. That'll probably be our first retreat. And it'll probably be in the UK or Europe. We'll do, Neil and I will both be there. Yeah, I'm not sure how long it'll be, a week or 2 weeks. And it'll be sort of full on training in meditation and training in Lohan Palm for those who are interested. So if you do want to hang out with me in real life, that's a good way to do it. I mean, you could just come to Edinburgh and we could get coffee or something, but that would be an expensive trip to just hang out with me for a few days. Okay, so back to questions now. Let's see. So Stu asks, can you explain the mechanics of memory wipes? Sorry, how are we supposed to learn if how are we supposed to learn if we have no memory of all previous life, all the mistakes and experiences we have accumulated? Right. One of the one of the practices that you do if you're doing actually that's not the right way to say it. One of the side effects of training in concentration is that you recall past lives. And there are techniques, specific techniques in things like Tantra and things like what Neil teaches at the end of that process, right? We're talking about you have gone through a whole process of physical, energetic, and mental transformation. And then you start a new program where you're working with the subtlest aspects that make up your being. And that's called in the Shaolin / Taoist tradition, because they have a common vocabulary for this in China, the two traditions do. It's called Neidan, internal alchemy, where you're working with the very subtlest aspects that make up your being, including the subtlest types of consciousness that occur when you do certain things with your energy body, right? So that system includes that final sort of stage. After you've worked with the body, the energy system, and the mind, you then work with the subtlest aspects of body, energy system, and mind. And you can use those to basically take more of you, for lack of a better term, to take more of you with you um, into the next life and remember more of your previous life next time. So there's that. The other aspect is that if you train in concentration and your concentration gets really good, gets into jhana states and formless jhanas and these sorts of things, you'll have more continuity between lifetimes. Your memory between lifetimes will be much better. Now, even if you don't remember all of that, what you can count on is that your character will carry on. So if you trained in compassion, loving kindness, humility, concentration, ethics, humility in regards to your teachers, refuge, and so on and so forth, then when you encounter the Dharma again in the next life, as some of you know, right? As some of you already know, you encounter this stuff for the first time, and all of a sudden, bang, you have dozens of qualities mentally and in terms of your character that you didn't have before, that it seemed like you didn't have to earn in this lifetime. You just totally transform, and people don't even know who you are, right? Like you've become a totally different person almost instantly. So you can carry over your good character and good qualities from lifetime to lifetime through the actions of karma, even if you can't remember your previous life. Okay? So that's basically how you do it, roughly speaking. Okay. Today, let's see. Today the senior monk at my Nichiren temple talked about dedicating all devotional activities to the benefit of all living beings in the universe. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great practice. Dedication according to the Mahayana sources. Dedication is a final step you would take after doing good actions, where you would then direct them in the highest possible way, and that directing of those actions, in terms of karmic theory, it protects them from being damaged, and it makes them bigger. It multiplies them. So if you combine an action with your understanding of emptiness, and if you combine an action with the desire to attain enlightenment and the benefit of all sentient beings through the attainment of enlightenment, then that karma is protected and multiplied and purified to a degree by those additions and will bear fruits for a much, much longer period of time. So it makes them much more powerful than they would have otherwise been. So it's a really skillful technique, really skillful. There's a lot of that in Tibetan practice. Okay. Neidan. That's right. Well, it looks like my commercial stunned the room into silence. There are no more questions. Let me make sure that's actually true. Sometimes YouTube lies to me on my streaming service. Let me see. No, it looks like there really is no more no more questions in the chat. Well, in that case, we've come a long way today. We went we went we went we went on a long journey. Oh, sorry. To go back to the shirt. So Neil and I decided on the character 3 in Chinese because there are 3 jewels, right? And Lohan, 18 Lohan is primarily a Buddhist system of training, so 3 jewels, right? Also, there are 3 treasures: body, the energy system, and consciousness. So there are 3 main aspects that make you up as a being, and Lohan trains all 3 aspects. So 3. In addition to this, there are 3 refined aspects: refined body, refined energy system, refined mind. And so, likewise, 3. So there are 3 jewels, 3 treasures, 3 refined treasures. So there's a lot of threes in Lohan. And so we went through quite a few relatively quickly, actually, but we went through quite a few sort of, should we do this? Should we do that? And decided that 3 is actually a really nice, this is like a really nice sort of, it encapsulates a huge amount of what you're doing. There are 3 dantians, right? You have the lower dantian here, you have the middle dantian, and you have the upper dantian. So there are 3 dantians you work with also. Yeah. So 3 jewels, 3 dantians, 3 treasures, 3 refined treasures. So Lohan is sort of lots of threes. So this idea of sort of three being the main thing, really made sense as a way of boiling down a lot of different stuff in the system in a graphical form. And I like that too in general about pictographic language. Pictographic language has a lot to do with tantra, actually, where a symbol is carrying and can carry dozens and dozens and dozens of layers of meaning in a way that's not quite the same as phonetic language. It's not quite the same. It makes you think differently to think in those kinds of symbols versus thinking in phonographic language. But I digress. Let's see. More questions. It looks like we're kind of winding down here. But I unpack happiness and the causes of happiness. No worries at all, Blue. No worries. No worries. How do you unpack what's meant by happiness and the causes of happiness? Yes. So happiness in the context of metta means nirvana, basically. Although often when I do metta practice, I think of not only ultimate benefit and ultimate happiness. Clean your room, make your bed. When you get out of bed in the morning, make your bed. How about that? It's like it's like make your bed, It's like there really is. It's funny. Peterson actually has a lot of information that's helpful for young people. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with him on a number of political things and whatever, but Peterson's a sharp guy, and he's helped a lot of people. And actually, there's a fair amount of what he values in terms of human character that I think is fully in line with Buddhist stuff. is is fully in line with Buddhist stuff and is worth listening to. Because again, if you're really familiar with Buddhist psychology and Buddhist values and all this, and you have that sort of Buddhist tunnel vision, and then you just sort of come over here and you look at it from this side, it can be really helpful to help you understand. Okay, well, I've thought about humility before. What is this person? What is this person? It's like make your vows. Uh, Peterson, man. Yeah. I mean, again, he has some ideas I don't agree with, and some of his politics I don't agree with, and whatever. But like the idea that you should be responsible, the idea that you should um, bear suffering, that you should bear difficulty, that as a person you should be capable of doing harmful things if that's what's required to do benefit. These are actually Buddhist values. If you're a bodhisattva, you take a vow as a bodhisattva that if you have to accumulate negative karma basically in order to benefit other beings, it's going to be good for them. It's not going to be good for you. You do it anyway. You do it anyway because you have a moral responsibility out of compassion where your sole concern is the benefit of them. You have a moral responsibility to take that negative karma upon yourself to be of benefit to them. You have a moral responsibility to go on the internet and tell people that you have good qualities, which is not a good thing to do, so that they'll listen to you enough that you can actually teach them stuff, even though you live halfway across the world. Uh, okay. Sorry. What were we talking about? Okay. So loving kindness is there's another way to never break a vow. You could be reborn as an animal. Then you'd never break a vow. Or a hell being. Or a hungry ghost. That's a great you'll never break any of your vows in that case. Oh my god. I'm gonna wake up tomorrow, there'll be like 4 followers left. They're like, this guy thinks we should listen to Jordan Peterson and talks about hell realms. I'm out of here. Mm. It would be really interesting, I think, to have a conversation with Jordan Peterson because he has steeped himself in Western psychology, Western philosophy, and Christianity. I mean, it would be fascinating as the type of person that I am who hasn't steeped myself in those things in the same way, but also has strong opinions and feelings that are similar to his on certain issues to talk those issues through with him. I think would be really interesting. I think that'd be really interesting. Uh, yeah. Uh, yeah, somebody wants to set that up. We'll do that. That'll be he'll be podcast guest number 2. Then everyone will leave. I'll have no more students, but at least oh Jesus. Okay. So love is mainly it's aimed at nirvana, and the causes of happiness are those things that the causes and conditions that lead to nirvana. But also you could think of samsaric happiness also is people just getting nice stuff and having nice rebirths. It's not a permanent solution, but it's better than the opposite. So if the best that that person can do or that being can do is to not be reborn as a dog or a spirit or a hell being, if that's the very best they can do, shouldn't I do everything I can to help them in that endeavor? Like if someone is a Christian of a certain kind and they hate everyone and they do a lot of harmful things, according to Buddhist karmic theory, that person's going to go to a lower realm. They're going to a bad rebirth. If I don't have the ability, to be clear, but if I had the ability to emanate as a Christian minister and I could teach them about Jesus in such a way that they stopped doing that and they became a better Christian with a softer heart and compassion and humility and developed good qualities and then ended up taking a heavenly rebirth instead. And then on top of that, I formed a karmic connection with that being so that in the future I can benefit them by teaching them more things. Wouldn't that be better? So your loving kindness is mainly aimed at nirvana, but it's also sort of like I want the best possible outcome for everyone at all levels and all stages of the process. And then your compassion is that you want them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So these two are intimately related, but they're not the same, right? They're not pointed at the same aspect. And then finally, bodhicitta is the recognition, really, finally, at the end of this process, where you think, if I really want that, and if I take personal responsibility for that, the very best condition for me to be in, if I want to bring all beings to enlightenment, if I want to help all beings have the best possible outcome at all layers of the process, whether that's just having upper rebirths until they've accumulated enough good karma to do further things in the process, or whether it's actually heading towards nirvana or the state of a shravaka, a pratyeka Buddha, or it's heading down the bodhisattva path, or whatever it is. Whatever it is, I want to make sure that people are heading towards the best possible results. So, to make a little bit of sense out of this in practical terms, I mean, have any of you wondered why someone who's quite serious about their Buddhist practice would teach secular style meditation to people of all faiths and all backgrounds and doesn't really care what their background is? Well, because if karmic theory is correct, then it really doesn't matter what we all believe about stuff. Your beliefs have very little to do with all of this. It's your actions. And so if I train people in how to train themselves in good character using what they already believe is important, then the outcome for them will be better, period. And likewise, maybe it's 50, 100 lifetimes, 1,000 lifetimes, 20,000 lifetimes, doesn't matter. But I've built this connection now with these beings, and potentially I can benefit them further in the future if I continue to make progress also. So on the one hand, I can give them temporary benefit, and on the long term, maybe if I don't fall into lower realms myself and you know all of this, maybe I can also provide long-term benefit. So there's all these layers. I don't need them to believe what I believe. And people who go on the internet and say that everyone else is going to hell and blah 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 in Buddhist forums, there are people like this sometimes. Or they're like, oh, everyone who believes in Jesus is headed to a lower realm, and everyone who's blah 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 blah. And there's only one truth, and it's just the Buddhist truth. The thing is that part of the Buddhist truth is that good character, ethics, concentration leads to upper rebirth, regardless of what beliefs are motivating you to pursue all of that. So if you had loving kindness, wouldn't you be doing whatever you could to make sure that people are doing that instead of becoming more divided, more hateful, more distrustful of each other, et cetera, et cetera? On the other hand, don't we say all over the place that lots of anger, lots of hatred, lots of sowing of division creates negative karma that sends you to lower realms? So probably running around creating more division between different groups of people as a Buddhist is not a good thing to be doing. Creating harmony between groups of people is a virtuous thing to be doing. Does any of this help, or am I just sort of rambling? I don't know. I'm just sort of bearing my soul on this issue at this point because as a religious person living in the real world, I have to struggle with the real modern world's issues. And that involves trying to be ethical, trying to develop good character, trying to train in concentration in the midst of how things are now. And if I talk to a great, oh man, it really, I mean, it raises the hair on my arms to even think about it. Ah, Blue, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Uh, it raises the hair on my arms to think about it. I was talking to a group of young Sikhs, and they're so hungry for this information because they have practices in their tradition where they have practices that will work, and they have intensive environments in which they'll work. But for the average person, from what I can tell, and I could be wrong, but from what I can tell, there seem to be gaps in the explanation for certain training aspects for concentration, for example, that make it very difficult to make progress in training and concentration. And yet there's a deep desire, because the tradition puts emphasis on this in certain places. There's a deep desire to train in concentration and to transform your character through working with the material, and that's rumination meditation and vipassana. So if they had these tools, they could be on their way to becoming great saints in the Sikh tradition. And how much better would this world be if how much better would this world be if there were 500 more great saints in the Sikh tradition and 500 more great saints in the Hindu tradition and 500 more great Christian saints and 500 more great Muslim saints. People who, when you saw them, it changed you. When you just saw them and they weren't like everyone else who's caught up in all the stuff we're caught up in, it changed you because you went, wow, there's something else other than this bullshit that we do, isn't there? Because their heart is absolutely beautiful, filled with love, filled with compassion, filled with humility, filled with intense drive, but in the right way, and a mind that's concentrated. We were talking about this, and this is quite funny, right? But if even in the Sikh tradition, because they have some great meditators too, there are videos and things of them talking, and you see this happen a lot, where like a really good meditator, quite often you'll see they pool their attention somewhere, right? And so they'll be talking to somebody over here, and this person's talking, and then there might be a video and somebody starts talking over here, and then you see their whole sort of being go, and it doesn't look, in terms of the way their attention moves, it doesn't look like a normal person, the way that their attention moves. Does that make sense? Because there's an intensity to the awareness moving, but it's also calm. It's serene, but it's fully engaged, fully sort of intensely, lucidly aware of what's happening. And there's a sense of ease and grace about the way that it moves, right? So this is just coming from concentration. This is like before you've done the most profound stuff. But even if we had like just a couple thousand more people like this on the planet, it would make a huge difference, because they would influence their mother, their father, their friends, all the people around them who knew them growing up, and now they're different, and blah 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 blah. And those people would become leaders in their communities probably, and they would influence hundreds of thousands of people. And there's only 6 degrees of separation, right? Some people say less now, like 4 degrees or whatever, which means that with a relatively small change in terms of capable beings on this planet, that this planet could be very different than it is. The aura, yeah. But I mean, this is beyond aura. This is like, you're the main character, bro. You're no longer a supporting character. I know, it's incredible to think about. If everybody's main concern, of course, we all need resources and all this, but if through all these activities, everyone's main concern was transforming the heart and gaining realization, gosh, this would be such a different planet than it is. It would just be unbelievably different. It wouldn't even have to be everyone, but if it was, even if half the planet was oriented this way in terms of religion, let's say, if people thought the primary thing I'm doing in religion is transforming this to be better in terms of good character, good qualities, and transforming this to be better in terms of benefiting myself, benefiting other beings, I think this world would be so incredibly different. But I don't think that's a dream. I actually think this is something that could be done. It's part of why I'm doing this. I think that if you train people in the right techniques and you help them understand, like, here's how you take the compassion or the love of Jesus on the cross and you start turning it into how your mind is. There's a way to do that, where your only thought when someone is harming you, instead of being, screw this person, I hope you die, right? Instead of that thought, that your sole concern is, I hope it turns out well for them. Forgive them. They don't know. Forgive them. Whatever powers there are, forgive them for this. Don't take it out on them because they don't know what they're doing. That's your sole concern. You can train so that your heart and your mind are like that. There's a logical series of steps for doing this. And any person who's willing to put in the time and the work can have a heart like that. How incredible! Again, how incredible it is to be a human being. How precious, how rare that you can do all of this. If you were a salmon swimming around in the ocean, there's not much chance of this. Rick and Morty, Buddhist ideas, huh? Oh, it's very nice. Cleaning up for the family, Blue. It's very nice of you. That's a good thing to do. It's not necessarily activated for the first time in this life, Jay. Your good karma is not from the past, not necessarily activated for the first time, but there's something in Buddhism called blessing. And blessing doesn't just mean like that some holy being bonks you on the head or something and now you're blessed. It means that a quality, a good quality, a capability, an insight that doesn't seem earned suddenly occurs. And this has to do with, in part, the circumstances you're in, maybe the beings who are there, the objects that are there, the texts, the religious texts or whatever that are there, whatever, right? The sort of the circumstances it has something to do with that. But what's being triggered is past good karma. Bang. That's what it was earned. It was just earned earlier. Right? And so when there was a story I heard of a prisoner, for example, in California, I believe it was. He read an article from the FPMT has a publication they do for prisons, and they published an article, and there was a photo of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and apparently this, from what this version that I heard, um, this prisoner, I don't know if he was reading the article or not, but when he saw Lama Zopa, he just saw Lama Zopa, who's a greatly accomplished practitioner. He saw his picture, and all of a sudden, he thought to himself, I'm never going to harm anyone again. Just, right? That's it. Imagine being in prison where you're at risk of all the things that happen in prison and deeply committing within the, the front in the bottom of your heart that you're not going to harm anyone ever again, even in the midst of all of that violence and things that might happen to you. So that's blessing. Some people, when they first encounter the Dharma in this lifetime, it's sort of like an okay experience. And some people, they encounter the Dharma in this lifetime and they go from being one person within a few days to being a completely different person that's almost unrecognizable to the people that know them. So, where did all of that change come from? We would say it's not just that you had like a really powerful first retreat in Goenka or something. It's because you did practice in the past, because a lot of people were at that retreat with you and they didn't have an experience like that, right? They were there, they did 5 days or 10 days or whatever, and they left not exactly the same. It was a good retreat or whatever, but they didn't leave unrecognizable. Yeah. So this is something that can happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were doing Buddhist practice, but it's that you had done practices of some kind in the past, and all of a sudden the good qualities that you've cultivated from those practices, they come back. They just come back and they're fully there. The thing about those sorts of things is quite often they start to fade slowly over time. So it's like It's like a it's like a fruit, right? The fruit has finally ripened on the tree. And that if you leave it on your countertop, the fruit sort of slowly withers up and whatever. So while the fruits are there, I say to some people, especially if you have that experience in the beginning and you want to do a lot of practice, don't just practice, do a lot of study. While that early enthusiasm is there, and these qualities sort of come easily, and the practice and all and the study and all this comes easily, study really hard with that energy, because you need to prepare this unit and this unit so that when the natural enthusiasm and blessing of the initial re-encounter with this stuff wears off, you now have mature, well thought through, logical motivations for what you're doing that aren't based upon that the inspiration you get from that initial experience. Because if you're lucky, you get like 3 or 4 years. You get 3 or 4 years where you can just do way more than other people when they first encounter this, and then it goes away. Ta-da! And if you don't not just do the practices, but if you don't develop a great deal of confidence in why it's important to do this, what all the moving parts of these traditions are, if you don't use some of that energy to make your heart mature about what you're doing and why you're doing it, then there's a danger that somewhere between sort of like 4 years and 10 years you'll fall off and do something else. So you need to use that early energy if you can, some of it, not all of it, but some of it, to develop a really mature worldview and attitude and motivation that's going to keep you going when the initial gusto wears off. So that's advice from my heart. And I was super dumb about all this. Yeah, like I did not do any of that intelligently. I just got extremely lucky. Again, my karma was just unbelievably lucky. Good karma. I went to a retreat. I had an extremely profound experience in a short period of time. I literally walked into a retreat, a frat boy trying to get a business degree, and came out 100% convinced I was going to be a Buddhist monk for the rest of my life in 5 days. Nobody knew who I was. I was a completely different, unrecognizable person after the retreat. And my father, convinced me to do one more year at university for my undergraduate before I became a monk. And then I thought, well, I'm not just going to study while I'm here. I need to find Buddhist stuff to do. And there was nobody teaching the type of Buddhism I had done the retreat in. So I found Tibetan Buddhism. Because I found Tibetan Buddhism, I met my teacher. And my teacher basically said, you don't know anything about this. You think you believe in Buddhas? Define a Buddha. Tell me what a Buddha is. Oh, you take refuge in the three jewels, right? What is the Dharma? Without using Google. What is the Sangha? Can you define the Sangha for me, since you're taking refuge in the Sangha? You say that you're going to have them as a safe direction. What does a safe direction mean? What's a Buddha? What are the qualities of a Buddha? What does it mean to take the Buddha as a safe direction? And these are the kinds of questions he would challenge me with, right? Because you have to develop a mature worldview about this that will carry you through. And if I hadn't met these people, maybe I would have joined a monastery and done all of that anyway. But luckily, I kind of fell into a group of people and met my main teacher, the guy who would become my main teacher, and met Geshe Dakpa Tokgyal, and spent a couple of years training pretty seriously with him before just sort of carrying on with Kimball independently. And yeah, it's only because of them maturing me as in terms of understanding what all this is and why I'm doing it that I carried on with it after the enthusiasm wore off. Because the initial enthusiasm does wear off. Well, yeah, hopefully just hanging around with talking to me and with your teachers and all this stuff, like you'll get enough by osmosis, I hope, over the next few years that at some point when you start to dread going to your cushion instead of longing after it for some period of time, that uh and when you like can't stand to think about one more Buddhist thing or your mind is going to explode and you just want to think about normal stuff for a while, etc., that you have enough maturity to now actually walk the path. But it's an open question. It's not a sure thing. I'm gonna wake up tomorrow. There's gonna be like 2 followers on my account. Uh, Good times. Okay. Plowing fields, setting the seeds. Yeah, yeah. It takes time. Um, there's a weird thing about karma also that unless a particular karma is really, really, really powerful, probably it's not going to ripen until your next lifetime. So if you're going to gain realizations that are extremely profound in this lifetime, part of it is because of the extremely powerful karma you create in this lifetime, but some of it is also what baggage, what seeds, what how much plowing did you do on the field and sowing of seeds in the past before you got to this life. You know, it's part of the reason you need to have a mature attitude because in some sense, if you look at them, even the biographies of really great masters, sometimes they spend 12 years in retreat and don't gain the accomplishments that they were hoping to gain during that time. Like you can do a lot of practice and not gain the accomplishments of the practices because you don't have the karma in place for the results to occur. But now that you've done all that practice, maybe later in this life, like 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, the results start to ripen and the realizations come. Or next life, very easily from an early age, the results are there and they start ripening and they start occurring. And then you're a great saint basically from a very young age, like some of the Tibetan tulkus and so forth, right? So quite often what you hear, it's really funny. In Zen, for example, they say you have instant enlightenment after 30 years of daily practice. And then after you've been instantly enlightened, you need to spend another 30 years being instantly enlightened over and over and over again so that you can become familiar with enlightenment. But it's a very common story that you do a lot of practice and then later as you're getting older, the results of those practices start to occur. But it's a long process. Part of it is karmic, and therefore part of it is not just that you've done a lot of practice. Part of it is that the karma from that practice has to ripen into the results. Don't tell the secularists, okay? Okay. Man, fitting in lots of study. Yeah, do your best. I mean, that's the thing. 2 hours of meditation, maybe you do an hour and a half of meditation and you put 30 minutes of study in there, you know? But if you're doing your master's, well, your master's is related to your career. Yeah, practicing after realization. Well, the Chinese systems, sweet and sour, the Chinese systems, they have a lot of this sort of stuff where they call certain things enlightenment that aren't actually full enlightenment yet. And because of that, there's a lot of practices you do after being enlightened. So it's just a different way of talking, you know? Because once you have enlightenment, full enlightenment means there's no other good qualities that you can attain, and there's no other negative qualities you can remove. Sangye, that's the definition of a Buddha. A Buddha is a being who has all good qualities and has removed all negative qualities. There's literally nothing left for them to develop, and literally nothing left for them to remove that could be removed that would be beneficial to remove, right? So their mind and character are flawless, and their powers to benefit others are as great as they can be, as powerful as they can be, and so on and so forth. So I think some of the Chinese systems, when they talk about this stuff, because they talk about enlightenment in a slightly different way than than some of the other systems, it can be a little bit confusing. Right. All right, my friends. Well, I think we've reached the end of the stream, I believe. Speaking of practice, I should probably go do some. So, thank you all for being here. I'll be here tomorrow at the usual time. Okay? Hope to see you again soon. Try not to die before I do. Cheers.